Greetings, everybody. I'm Salvador Cordova. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. Please let me know if the audio is coming through okay. I have sent a link to our friend Emory Moina, who will be talking about Christian cemeteries. Actually, that's an inside joke. You'll get it when he shows up. What we're really talking about when I mentioned the word cemeteries. So, what motivated this rather spur of the moment stream, and most of my shows now are kind of spur of the moment, is there was some negotiation about me and John Maddox having a debate. I thought they were specifically targeting me, and I may have misinterpreted an email. If this sounds like a confused mess, it totally is. Someone by the who's a moderator at Modern Day Debate just sent me an email and said these two guys want to debate on is DNA evidence, does DNA show evidence for God? And I said, sure, let's, I'm willing to try it. And somewhere I said, just for, just in the interest of keeping the show going in case there had to be substitutions, I said, well, if John Maddox can't join me, how about Rob Stadler or James Carter? Since this is talking about DNA, really an abiogenesis debate. And when the name Rob, what ended up happening is the tag team was going to be me and Rob Stadler. When it materialized that it was going to be that we were offering Rob Stadler and myself arguing the affirmative that DNA is evidence of God, the negotiations broke down. So a lot of this is also possibly because what was said between the parties was going through a third party, and we weren't actually getting the exactly what one party really wanted. And so I'm trying to establish communication with the other parties and just get the story straight. I don't know what's really going on. There could be a lot of confusion, and I don't want either side to be making, jumping to conclusions. So just suffice to say, I accept that maybe there was not clarity in terms of what we were trying to do. So Digital Gnosis, I think your name is, or James Fodor, maybe we can work this out directly amongst ourselves. Same for John Maddox. I don't know what's going on. So unfortunately, I already had snagged Rob Stadler, Dr. James Carter, professor of organic and biochemistry, though he's favorable to the position, said that he prefers not to debate. And I'm going to support his point in a little bit on that. So I'd already contacted Rob Stadler, and we were all scheduled to start working. He wanted 3 weeks to prepare for this debate. I'm like, oh my goodness, I think you're taking modern day debate way too seriously. And I began to have some reservations, and no disrespect to James Coons, but that place has 90% atheists, the feeling I get, and they come out to flat earth debates regularly. And I don't know, Rob Stadler's my friend, and I don't know that I want to subject him to such a hostile crowd. And he's just if you see his temperament, if you see my temperament, he's even more soft-spoken than I am. And I don't know that it would help. I was really thinking of trying to help promote his book with Change 10, The Stairway to Life. And so that's why I even suggested it. So before I began having, we were going to have some work sessions on our debate. I got word, our very first work session was tonight. I got word half an hour before that this was, hey, John, would you like to join in just briefly? And because I don't know what's going on, I'm going to send you a link, brother. And I may have misread the emails and I've totally screwed this up. I take responsibility for misreading, misunderstanding, and apologies to everyone. I'm sending you a StreamYard link right now. If you have access to your email, I'm going to send it to you, and maybe we can kind of talk about this, and you can also lay down the gauntlet and tell your opponents what you think. But so this is all leading up to what I wanted to say. So I said, Rob, I really do want to promote your book, and I feel bad that I even got you ensnared even this far. And he said, and I said, but Rob, I would like you to come on my channel sometime. And so we came up with this idea. It's like, what would Sal Cordova and Rob Stadler say in the debate? So this will be kind of a one-sided, I tentatively planned this for April 30th. And so regarding what James Carter said, that he declined to do debates. And I wanted to say, well, there's what they call Brandolini's Law. And I saw this in action when I debated T-Jump. Brandolini's Law, there's a vulgar version of it, and I'm going to give kind of the sanitized version. It takes substantially more effort. It takes an order of magnitude. It takes 10 times more effort to clean up a falsehood that someone puts on the table. 10 times more effort. We saw this with Dave Farina and James Tour. Dave Farina made a disgusting video, very anti-Christian, 20 minutes long. The amount of garbage that was on there took a world-class chemist in James Tour, who, by the way, was summoned to the United States Congress to give his testimony on chemistry matters. That's how elite he is. And it took him 10 hours of a presentation, 15-part series, numbers 0 to 13 with some subparts. And it took a month. That's an example of Brandolini's Law. And that's not including all the research he had to do. And how all this also involved Rob Stadler. Rob Stadler is a PhD from MIT and Harvard. Millions of people have his medical devices implanted in them. He has 140 patents, very accomplished scientist. He wrote the book with Change Tan, Stairway to Life. Now, Professor Dave was saying some falsehoods on his channel, and LPP, where are you? Come back, brother. He was saying some falsehoods on his channel, and Rob Stadler called him out. Rob's even more soft-spoken than me, so I'm sure he was very polite. Professor, quote-unquote, fake Professor Dave banned him. And so it was kind of just poetic justice that James Tour put Dave Farina in his place. And I kind of said, if we're going to appear on Modern Day Debate, I want a piece of Farina, and I want Rob Stadler as my tag team partner. So that's pretty much all I have to say. I don't know where these negotiations are. I'm just laying this out, and maybe we can just say what we want. Personally, I'm not that eager to debate right now because of Brandolini's Law, because T-Jump just said one thing, and I'm just like, this is going to take me a whole 10 hours to uncoil it. So LPP, thanks for joining us.
Oh, of course. Yeah. This whole deal, I'm not sure what the whole kerfuffle is. It's obvious what it is. They wanted to just try and, come after us. And what I find interesting is supposedly, because I'm like, oh yeah, if Rob wants to do it, sounds good. Apparently that's the equivalent of me being afraid, while they're now refusing to debate a dual Stanford MIT PhD who literally wrote a book on the origin of life problems. And now they're insisting that they don't want to do it because I'm supposedly afraid to debate them. I don't really understand how that makes any sense whatsoever. You're literally, not figuratively, literally the one who is now refusing to engage in the debate because a more formidable opponent than myself is going to be in the equation, and which I find rather entertaining on some levels. But
And I want to apologize to you. I may have totally misread the email. I
no,
didn't.
no, you did not. You did not. I mean, there's no way, shape, form, or fashion about it. I mean, it was a tentative deal. Like, yeah, I can do it, and then I mean, I'm in the middle of a move, so it's like when I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. But then when Rob said he would, I mean, it's like, man, do it. Like, I'm totally down with that. I mean, I'd rather watch that than than engage in it. I mean, I would personally prefer to have watched that debate, and because there's all sorts of new things that would probably be brought up or different angles that you guys could bring to the equation because of your greater level of knowledge. I think it would have been rather fun, and it's I mean,
Yeah.
I probably would have asked some super chat questions. One of which would be, so Dr. Stadler, I was recently engaged in a after show for a debate that didn't happen with one called CRISPR-Cas9, where he categorically insisted that the annealing problem did not apply unless you had multi-kilobase long strands. You have a whole chapter in your book on this exact topic and how the annealing problem does apply to shorter strands. And you specifically refer to multiple papers about this. Would you mind to expand upon the annealing problem from an origin of life research perspective for short template strands, replication that the one and only CRISPR-Cas9 was claiming had no relevance in relation to annealing? So, I mean, that may or may not be something I might have asked in a more condensed version, obviously, but in a super chat. I'm just saying, if that would have happened, I probably would have asked that question. Just saying.
Well, to be fair, we got a lot of information secondhand, not directly from our would-be opponents, and so apologies in advance to Digital Gnosis and James Footer.
Sal, do not apologize to those clowns. So Digital Gnosis.
See,
So
John,
here's why.
Here's
why Sal and John are perfect debate partners.
Listen, Sal, the reason I'm saying this is I had a live interaction over on S.J. Thompson's channel with him like a week and a half ago, okay? Or 2 weeks ago now. And he was being a snide, snarky little jackass. And I called him out on something, right? And which he categorically denied, and then accused me of gaslighting. Okay.
Oh, he's the one.
I then left the stream, rewound the video, watched it twice to make sure that what I had accused him of doing was correct. Came back in, and then just asked him to retract. Like, look, I went back and watched it. You want to go and just retract your accusation of gaslighting, misrepresentation, etc., etc. He doubled down, insulted my intelligence, questioned my mental state, and then proceeded on another stream on his channel to question my intellect and basically say that I was dumb. And it was clear as the day when he had made false accusations and claimed 100% that his memory was valid and what I was saying was false. When if anybody goes back and watches the video, you'll see that the point that I made was 100% correct, and that he had not only taken his position once, but twice and kind of 3 times before he issued any kind of clarification whatsoever. Oh, wait, and the clarification happened after he'd been called out. So it's a whole double. Anyway, enough of my tangent there. So no, he's and also as a sidebar over on other channels. So Digital Gnosis tries to act like he's this like intellectual, person. No, he's over on like Trinity Radio and other places talking mad trash. He's a like straight up disciple of Pine Creek Doug. Goes on his channel all the time. Like he follows Pine Creek Doug and is learning from him and all this kind of stuff. Nah, he's a joke.
Well, John, when you come on my channel, I know it's going to be lively because I'm so plain vanilla by comparison. I know just you have a very colorful way of describing things. And now this is starting to make sense because when you and I were on SJ's channel and we had that discussion on free will, and a lot of people loved that discussion. It was shortly thereafter we got that challenge. And I think someone really had it in for you. And So that kind of explains what's going on. This debate really may not even be about trying to get to the bottom of the origin of life problem. So now I'm kind of, I don't know that as I said, I'm not that eager to debate, not because I don't want to engage the topics. If they want to debate, it has to be a format that will prevent stuff like Brandolini's Law, because, people like the flat earthers are able to make a living for MDD because they're just able to generate drama and prevent real, getting to the truth. So that's just kind of my feeling about some of these debates. Just for the record, for the viewers out there, I'm happy to have discussions with qualified individuals and who are willing to critique my work. With some level of expertise. I'm fine to take questions from people that are, if I said something that they misunderstood. I'm sorry to say something really mean, but I'm really not interested in debating high school dropouts that have burned their brains out on drugs and alcohol. Okay.
So Sal, that last night's stream, which I predicted, by the way, did trigger Put It in the Gang. And they had something completely different scheduled. And then I guess somebody, it was obviously that was going on past Pudding's bedtime. So people obviously messaged him like, you must review this. And so they were bashing you, bashing me, of course, on that whole deal. And what I find very interesting is of course, we all know that their streams never actually stay focused on anything of
goodness, no
coherence, but the supposed focus of that was going to be on the
BMP.
In relation to morphology and such. And it's I really amazes me how they don't seem to be able to see the forest for the trees. I mean, me and CRISPR were arguing about that in relation to, he's like, well, it increases femur length. And I'm just like, so you're telling me that a mutation this can lengthen or shorten the femur? Do all of the other factors have to be in place in order for the freaking femur to exist? Not just talking about length, we're talking about it itself, right? And he didn't want to talk about that. He just wanted to focus on the fact that there could be a change. And to me, from my perspective, I'm like, you do realize you're talking about, I changed the font size on this text, right? Or we changed the banner, or the border padding in the CSS, and you're now claiming that has any relevance to the overall function, and that you don't have to account for all of the other integral parts of the system that must be in place in order for that to even have relevance. It's I don't know. I know you guys talked for quite a while after I went to sleep. Where'd things go with you?
Well, CRISPR and I had a good discussion. He critiqued one of my presentations. He said,
yeah, I heard that about the identity similarity
versus similarity. And I actually like the word similarity better than identity, but I'm going to defer to him because I presume, because he's gone through the peer review process, and I respect that. And he is a teacher, is a PhD student. And also, one thing I mentioned yesterday, I said, guys, I know some of my creationist colleagues kind of resent me being chummy with the evolution guys. And I said, you know what? Emory and I and other Christians that are going through college, you think we're being just nice to the other side? We live in that environment going through secular schools. It's a matter of also humbling yourself as a Christian to learn from non-Christians many times, and almost invariably they're not creationists. I would hope some of my professors are Christians, but what they teach in the classroom is not creationism. And most of the people around you, we don't know what they are, but I usually presume that they're not creationists. Now, to my surprise, when I was at the NIH, the 2 times I had a conversation, one guy said, oh yeah, I read Behe's Black Box. It's very interesting. And another guy said, I don't believe in evolution. And I was just like, wow, that's refreshing. And then one time I was in a biochemistry class. The professor said, this chemical, this chemical system's so elegant. It's just so well designed. And he said, oh, wait, I'm not supposed to use that word. Not supposed to say that. And then he just kind of, rephrased it. The whole class laughed because it's like everyone knew what you're not supposed to say, but what's so blatantly obvious. But the point is, Emory and I pay non-creationists to teach us biology.
Mm-hmm.
So if CRISPR-Cas or Dr. Dan come on my channel, I'm gonna say, I'm grateful if you teach me what I don't know. What would you teach me if I were in your class? And that it's simple as that.
Well, and I have no issue with intellectual dialogue, discourse, and operating from the perspective that people know things I don't know. I mean, I take an active stance on trying to learn as much as humanly possible. My issue with people like CRISPR and Pudding and other folks, but when they approach discussion from an adamant, arrogant perspective, that I have no idea what I'm talking about, or people, folks on our side of the arena don't know what we're talking about, can have no valid conclusion or understanding. And if there's any way, shape, form, or fashion disagreement with consensus and status quo, therefore you must not have the intellectual capacity to comprehend what's being discussed.
Yeah,
and that part for me, this is where the difference between myself and like you. But I'm not saying you guys don't counter, but for me, it's like, okay, then back up your BS.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's rock and roll. Let's have the conversation, and now back up your talking points, and that's what was happening a lot with me and CRISPR last night. And I'm just using it as an example. Like, very often, it's like, okay, back up your talking point claim. You make these claims with such extreme confidence, and that, well, this is 100% been proven, and it's like, no, it has not. Like, no, it has not, and I know it has not, and if you actually went and did as much research, I'm speaking rhetorically, or like these people actually went and had gone and done as much research as they claim to have done, they should know that it's not been done before. And we get oftentimes accused of, oh, you only read the abstract. It's like, no, actually, I read the whole freaking paper. And the claim that you're making is a interpretation from the abstract that is contradicted in the conclusion of the same paper you're referencing, while claiming I don't know what it says. And that's where I get kind of fire back and be like, let's if we want to actually have rational discourse and dialogue and debate, then we need to be operating on an even playing field, and that's where I got right from.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say that I did invite CRISPR to come here, and also Dr. Dan. He actually did show up to the side chat, and he said, I'm down for a debate. And he said, what's the topic? I said, does DNA show evidence for God? He said, I think I'll pass. So,
well, hey, sidebar, in the debate over with Kent Hovind and all that, and Maddie, if Danny Boy is in the side chat listening right now,
he went to bed.
Okay, well, he categorically dismissed any on like. Well, the technical term is indeterminate growth, but he categorically dismissed any animals continuing to grow until death, because Kent Hovind was making that reference potentially in relation to explaining.
Wait. He said that some animals don't grow that all animals don't grow until they die?
Hey, audio's went crazy for me. Can you say again?
Sure. No, he actually said that, no animal grows.
I gotta drop out. My audio's been going weird. I gotta drop out. I'll be right back. Hang on.
Okay.
All right, Emory.
If he said what I think he said, Dr. Dan, you might want to go back to your viruses on that one. If John correctly represented what he said, that's every herpetologist in the world is about to have a fit with him.
Yeah, I saw it in the chat, and so Ken Hovind was talking about that, and then Danny Boy denied it, And like nobody thinks that or something to that effect.
He might
And
want to go talk to his herpetologist colleagues.
well, I know, and I'm like, I know this. and I Googled it real quick just to make 100% sure that, I hadn't misinterpreted it. And sure enough, it's like determinate versus indeterminate growth. Like, okay, yes, mammals, birds, no, not all reptiles, yeah, etc. But these do, like clearly delineated like which ones did, which ones didn't. Hey, we're not sure on these. It seems to be on this set, and I'm just like, it took me less than 30 seconds to find this.
Yep.
And
Not surprised.
Now, I got to say that I didn't.
I also want to just real quick. You can't know everything in every field. So, like, I'm not hammering him too hard for not knowing something that's well outside of his, because he's a virologist, I think, if I recall correctly. So I'm not hammering him too hard for not knowing. But the fact that he has a PhD and he doesn't and he's coming across as someone who presenting himself as an authority on the topic, you can't do that. Like, you probably should have looked that one up, Dr. Dan, before you made that claim. Now, I don't agree with Hoven's claim either, by the way. I'm just pointing that out, because I know where Hoven was going with that, and I don't agree with it. But at the same time, like, really? Come on, guys. You're taught that in, 8th grade?
So just as a heads up, guys, I actually wasn't sure whether John here would have been joining us. So I invited Emory because I knew I was going to run out of stuff to talk about. But whenever John was a radio host, he just has a gift for being able to communicate and talk. I could imagine John doing a monologue for 4 hours and having
Easily.
no problem.
are you kidding? No, not even close. It's
No, John functions best with someone he can ask questions to.
Or argue with. Oh my goodness.
That's true. I mean, so when I had my radio show, it was pretty fun. So I did my radio show is called the Crowd Pitch Show, and I would have entrepreneurs who were trying to raise capital. They would come on my show and pitch the city and ask people to come and support, invest in their companies and stuff. And it was like a Shark Tank on the radio, but the general public was able to go and invest in the companies. And I enjoyed that a lot, but it was very interesting, the just stark differences in different guests that would come on, and sometimes you had to basically pull them through the whole through the hour, right? Of and I would even send them the questions, okay, here's how the interview's going to go, here's what I'm going to say, here's the questions you need to be able to answer. I give them time frames of okay, so when you're doing your formal pitch, keep it no more than 5 minutes, but try to keep it in the 3 to 4 minute range if that's the best time frame. Yada yada. Anyway, and it just amazed me how sometimes people just could not do it. And I'd be having to extract information from it. I'm just come on, let's do this. Let's make this happen. I'm giving you the chance to pitch, 20, 30,000 people to invest in your company. Let's have some passion here. It was fun times though. Very interesting to watch the differences.
Well, the reason I mentioned that was, Emory, thanks for your patience. So I invited Emory to talk about Christian cemeteries. So we're gonna change topics real fast here. Emory, take it away.
Sure. And by cemeteries, he doesn't mean where you bury people. It means where you go to die. Being seminaries. And I will and as John says, I'm about to back up my my statements here. So probably a lot of people here are aware of someone who has gone to a seminary and come back either as a pagan or as someone who no longer has the same views on the Bible that they did prior to going to seminary. And there's a very good reason for that, because most of the seminaries are whitened sepulchers. They look great on the outside, but inside they're full of dead men's bones. The appropriate way to refer to them is as Jesus referred to the Pharisees. But realistically, a lot of seminaries teach teach Gnosticism. They just don't call it Gnosticism. And there's a couple of ways they do this. And I had this interaction with Sentinel Apologetics the other day on John's channel, which then turned into my hour-long podcast. It was one of my most popular standalone podcasts where I didn't have a guest on because people apparently liked that stuff, I guess. I don't know. Maybe people like conflict. I don't know. Essentially, there's a couple of different ways that this Gnosticism gets pumped out, but there's also outright paganism. So let's go through the worst of it first. Let's just go through some of the stuff I found. So, I found this stuff because my parents were considering a church, and it was in a particular denomination that they didn't know much about. So they asked me to research the seminaries to see what kind of pastors they'd get. And so let me read you some of the things that are part of, and these are more liberal churches, denominations. So this is maybe not applied to you, but we're going to get to the other stuff here shortly. One particular school, American Baptist Seminary of the West, includes a non-discrimination policy that includes sexual orientation and sexual expression. In other words, it's okay for you to be transgender or gay at this particular seminary. Social justice is listed as a core value in the message from the president. And by the way, I have links for all of this, okay? Anybody wants to check anything I say, I can drop a link, all right? Or if you can get in touch with me afterwards, I can send you a link.
Or go to Emory's website.
You can go to the website, inhisimage.blog, send me a message through the blog. I did a whole video on some of this stuff a while ago, which I think I was either Redefined Living or Godzilla Freak. I can't remember which one. Mentioned in the chat where I actually green screened in a graveyard behind me while I did it, because it was just that bad. And a lot of seminaries are basically teaching paganism. Like the ones I just read, that was from American Baptist Seminary of the West. Social justice listed as a core value. Gay and homosexuality, that's perfectly fine. Andover Newton Theological School, which has now been merged into Yale Divinity School, quote, fosters a sacred commitment to the love and knowledge of God through, listen to this, ecology, human wellness, creation care, and economic viability. Now, let me ask you something. Where is the gospel in any of that? Do you hear the word gospel? Do you hear the word scripture? Do you hear the word Bible? No, it's not there. But ecology, the study of, how environments interact with each other. I mean, it gets worse. This is not even worse. Economic viability, creation care, human well. Really? I mean,
can I interrupt you?
Sure, go ahead.
Because that struck a nerve. I was at and this is like 20 years ago at the Baptist Student Union, and the woman running it, I didn't care for. I couldn't put my finger on it. She didn't treat the students well. She didn't seem to be putting them first. It's like, oh, I need to go to sleep now. And, college kids like to stay up late.
Yeah.
And they couldn't hang out. She said, I'm driving you all out. I need to go to sleep right now. And she's kind of mean about it. I'm just like, okay, why are you in this business? And then the only Bible study I remember her doing was something on environmentalism. Didn't really quote any scriptures. And that was the last Bible study I attended. And so what you're describing rings true. And I couldn't put I was actually kind of appalled. I'm like, people are trying to find meaning in life and they're trying to get through school. Can you say something encouraging? And she's talking about environmentalism. So now I know where she may have gone to seminary.
This is not even the worst of it, Sal. This is not even the worst of it. So then move down to another seminary here, and I'm reading through an email that I sent to my parents. I'm pulling out the stuff that is really bad, but some of this other stuff is more tied to various doctrinal stuff, and I'm trying to pull out the stuff that's really, really bad. This one, Central Baptist Theological Seminary, or Cemetery, should I say. Quote, the richness of diversity and engaging voices of different ages, races, ethnicities, genders, orientations, and faith traditions enable us to have a distinctive and relevant voice in global Christianity. So in other words, we're going to pull from other faiths. We're going to pull this knowledge that only these groups have, this quote unquote race or this ethnicity or this gender group that, they've all got special knowledge that can help us understand. That's standpoint epistemology, folks. In other words, there's no actual truth. Every truth is determined by what groups you belong to. Okay, and you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of that in this garbage, right? Let's see here. And then part of the stuff that their students are required to sign. This is something their students are required to sign to attend there. I will personally and publicly support my colleagues who experience discrimination on the basis of gender, gender identity, race, age, marital status, sexual orientation, national origin, physical impairment, or disability. So in other words, I can't just, disagree with a homosexual lifestyle. No, I have to actively affirm transgenderism. I have to actively affirm homosexuality. I have to actively affirm those things in order to go to the school. And if you read through their handbook, you also find that if you don't do those things, you are subject to some kind of disciplinary action, which may result in, quote, suspension or dismissal from the institution. Keep in mind, folks, this is a quote unquote seminary, right? Colgate Rochester Crozier Divinity School offers a, quote, black church, woman and gender emphases as part of their quote unquote, oh goodness, what's the term I'm looking for? As part of their coursework. Describing their president as follows: a renowned womanist scholar and member of a certain denomination, doesn't matter. Such and such person's research and writing examines connections between faith, race, and violence with specific attention to historical and contemporary implications of lynching and a culture of lynching in the United States. This is critical race theory. And we're going to get back to critical race theory in a minute, because critical race theory is one of the two forms of Gnosticism being taught in our seminaries. All right, we'll come back to that in a minute. They offered a class in the fall of 2020. That class was entitled Celtic Spirituality for Modern Life. This is a seminary. Remember that this is supposed to be a Christian college.
Don't they have better things to talk about? I mean,
they do.
Isn't Christian history rich enough to not have time for such stuff?
No, see, they actually do better than that. Currently being taught this semester a forest spirituality class. Yes, this semester. In 2020, spring 2020.
Forest is in trees?
Yes, forest is in trees. Yes. In spring 2020, they offered a woman and gender perspectives on faith, their standpoint epistemology, and a, quote, water is life class. Keep in mind, this is supposed to train people to be pastors. This is paganism. This is outright paganism. And some of you may have watched my video where I walked through, I pulled the clip of the genius who's saying that he's getting in touch with his Nordic spiritualism in order to understand his Christianity. Yeah, that's this. That's where this is coming from, folks. It's coming from this garbage. Let's see. Morehouse School of Religion. This one's really bad. This is a message from the dean. Our message is clear. We believe it is our duty to define global economic justice as the ethical imperative for the 21st century. We define economic justice as the word of reconciliation. By that, we mean wealth and income inequality. Wealth and income inequality includes unbiased immigration, mass incarceration, economic reparations policies. We see these as related and necessary changes in order for people of African descent to achieve the word of reconciliation. Morehouse is a traditionally, quote-unquote, black school. That's straight communism. And they're importing it into theology. 2017 course syllabus includes courses on social justice, womanist feminist interpretations, African and Middle Eastern religions, and womanist theology. Right? Now, Northern Baptist Theological Seminary. It's a theistic evolutionist school. Professor Scott Knight teaches there. He co-authored a book with Dennis Venema called Adam and the Genome, which rejected the historical existence of Adam. Go ahead.
Time out. Dr. Sanford and I annihilated that book.
That's not
because
hard.
Dennis Venema's, so the book that Emory's talking about,
mm-hmm.
The favorite example of evolution was the nylon-eating bacteria. And Dr. Sanford and I just blew that thesis out of the water. unfortunately, we took down a lot of other people, and we couldn't get our paper published in peer review, but we did release it. We did release it in a preprint that people could see, and it's gone through several revisions. Some of the comments actually by our critics were actually taken with serious consideration, and it corrected some minor flaws in the paper, but the conclusion was always right. We had several iterations of this, and Venema has since backed down and retracted on his claim of, this is, I guess it's no longer his favorite example of evolution. So it's really kind of satisfying to hear you also talk about McKnight. So go ahead.
Yes. Continuing on with the Northern Baptist, their MDiv requires a course entitled Race, Poverty, Justice, Reconciliation. That's not going to be a critical theory class at all, folks. Not at all. And for those who don't know what critical race theory is, it's the application of critical theory to quote-unquote racial studies. In other words, basically what it is it applies the principles of intersectionality. Intersectionality is, well, everybody falls into these groups. Like Sal would fall into a male Asian group. I would fall into a quote-unquote white male group, right? And Sal, according to intersectionality, will be more oppressed than I am because he's Asian. But he wouldn't be as oppressed as someone who is quote-unquote black, a black man, because a black man is considered to be more oppressed because of the quote-unquote history of racial oppression.
Or a transgender black woman.
Oh, yeah. So, and it goes, the further the more intersections you have, the more oppressed you are considered to be. And someone who is a quote unquote white male, you're considered to be not oppressed at all. You're basically at the bottom, unless you're gay. Then you might have a little bit of oppression in there. If you can, throw in some extra stuff, that you might get a couple of extra. But the most oppressed group is like supposedly like a black Muslim lesbian or something like that. I mean, it's like some really wacko, which doesn't really fit with Islam at all. But whatever. So this is their whole idea. And they basically is trying to divide society down into these really, really tiny groups so basically they can pit everybody against each other and have everybody cut each other's throats, because Marxism loves that, because that's how they gain power. But that's what you're looking at here. This is a critical race theory class where they're looking at basically talking about how, disproportionate poverty. I have an article on my website that's entitled Black Lives Matter, an Organization from Hell. I didn't write it. Somebody else wrote it. But it's a very good article. I'd recommend, if you want a crash course on this, that you read that, because it just walks through all the stuff that's wrong with the Black Lives Matter movement. I also did a podcast on it. I went for over an hour with the same guy who wrote it when we talked about social justice and understanding the Bible and how the two just don't fit together. But that's let's just continue moving on with what I was getting at. Master of Community Relations, we're still at the same school, requires a class entitled Race, Reconciliation, and Reparations. And by the way, if you don't know what reparations are the idea that a group has to pay another group for something that supposedly that Group A did to Group B. The problem is they want these reparations to be made for slavery, which was 150 years ago. And nobody, literally nobody, who was alive then is still alive now to be paid. And they want, go ahead, so I can see you want to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, could we can continue the list at another time. I did have some things on the seminary I wanted to share too.
Sure, go ahead.
And partly because I'm running out of gas.
Oh, I understand, Sal. That's fine.
Well, go ahead and finish up your thought, and we can continue this.
This is like scratching the surface, and these are liberal seminaries. Let me throw something out here real quick that'll illustrate even the conservative seminaries are not safe. Can I do that real quick before I let you?
Yeah. Oh, please.
Okay. This just happened. This thing just happened recently, and I have a link to this too. This is from Dallas Theological Seminary. Listen to this. Is the president of the seminary. Quote, "This MLK, as in Martin Luther King, chapel gives me, in serving as president of Dallas Theological Seminary, a public opportunity to reaffirm my personal and our institutional apology for our past racial sins." There it is, folks. That's CRT applied to a more conservative school. In other words, even though this president of the school was not alive when blacks were being oppressed by whites, quote unquote, and both of those are in quotes, guess what? He still has to apologize for it because he bears, quote unquote, white guilt for doing this. And if you think Dallas is the only one, you got another thing coming. Biola just set up a division of diversity and inclusion. Okay, that's Biola, folks. All right, and if you think that that's all, I mean, I can sit here and read the provost of Southern Seminary openly came out and admitted, yeah, I'm a racist and I'm going to battle with racism until I die and get my glorified body. He actually said that, and he still has a job. He's still there. Mueller didn't fire him. Right? And we can read through more of this garbage. I've got tons of this stuff, and I can come back and do a full show on it because I let Sal go to bed, but I have got tons of this stuff. If you are going to seminary, you are going to be indoctrinated into an anti-biblical worldview because you've got two forms of Gnosticism, and I didn't even get to that. But I've got tons of this stuff that I could spend hours going through this stuff.
The thing I was going to cover is more systemic and also things that I've seen. And this does tie to the creation evolution controversy and apologetics and evidences and reasons for the Christian faith. I've been continually appalled for the last almost the whole time I've been a Christian that the discussion of why we should believe in the Christian faith doesn't happen in the church. They avoid the discussion, actually. And I suspected, kind of a skunk in all this. And I've been also appalled by the kind of preaching that have come out of some of the pulpits. No disrespect to some of these pastors. They have hard jobs. But now looking back, I'm just like, I can't believe what I heard. And it can be very, very subtle. But sometimes you just feel like, this is just a session of insults and talking down to people and not encouraging them, not giving them reasons to believe, not giving them reasons to hope. It seemed just like a start to finish scolding session. Not the sort of thing, I never saw anyone feel penitent or struck in some of these. And now I'm starting to see, and I'm going to comment on that. Now, me personally, if an institution has failed, I don't have a problem saying, our institution had some bad things going on and it was wrong. But this whole suggestion that we have to apologize for things we didn't do, I do have a problem with that, though.
Yep.
And the Dallas thing was kind of like on the edge, but my pastor did something that was kind of evident. He's asking people to apologize for sins that they didn't commit. I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I have a serious problem with that.
Yeah.
So let me just share this. I got effectively deplatformed from a so-called Reformed Reddit.
Hey.
The moderators there, I thought this would be great. People theologically minded and conservative. And I couldn't believe how left-wing they are. And they had a lot of hostility toward me. Some of you saw my video on solving the problem of evil. And I related it to the Snow White story. They banned that. They deleted it. They said, oh, this is self-promotion. I'm just like, so just because someone writes a video, it's automatically self-promotion and it's not good content.
Yeah.
And yet you let other videos go through here. I said, I'm done with this place because they hated the fact that I was not left-wing in my views. But one thing I think also did get under their skin. One young lady said, I've just become a Christian. I think I want to go to seminary to learn the Lord more. And I was actually horrified to hear that.
That is the worst possible thing you can do.
I said, you can read the Bible. You can interact with people and work with their lives. And I always felt that because when I've had certain professors of seminary come and give sermons, you're just like, and you're teaching the next generation of pastors. And I mean, I knew, I was like, up until like this year, I was reluctant to say that. But I'm going to read this thing, and not everyone will agree. I'm going to share my screen, and whether I'm right or wrong, I think there is a grain of truth in some of what I'm feeling, and I just want to articulate it. And I'm very grateful for there are pastors that come here, and God bless you for coming here and hearing me out. And I sympathize with your all's jobs, but you take a kid out of college, you give him an MA in divinity, and he's still young, and he's going to tell people how to live their lives. I'm just like, well, unless the Lord really anoints him, that's asking a lot of an individual. He's going to be counseling people on marriage and family. I would think someone that's been married like 30 years might actually have a little more to say. I'm just pointing just some common sense things out. I'm not trying to diss the ministry here, but one of the most successful churches that I had seen were run by college professors at Virginia Tech. And many of them were, approaching retirement age, and they wanted to serve the church. I said, okay, so they've raised families, they've had careers in the secular world, they've seen all sorts of problems. It doesn't surprise me that their church was very effective, because they had people that actually lived a lot of life and saw a lot of problems and dealt with them. Someone out of college, and then he's gone to seminary, and they're learning Greek and Hebrew and theology.
Bad theology, I might add.
Yeah. Okay, so this article I'm going to share, and take it for what it's worth. Whatever's bad, please dispense of it. And if you want to comment and say you disagree, that's great. Because I don't want bad stuff going out of this channel. But if there's good stuff, please, by all means, receive it. Because I have to tell you, I applied for a doctorate to try to get a doctorate at Liberty University in apologetics. And they said, you're not qualified. They said, you need a master's of divinity. And I was like, they wanted $50,000 too. And they wouldn't stop calling me. They kept trying to call me once I just said, I'm interested in this. It's like, boy, also the hard sell of marketing. And I said, please stop calling me. I'm not interested anymore. And they, but they're calling me like 2 or 3 times a day. And that was kind of disturbing. It's like, oh, you're really eager for, they said, we want that $75 application fee. I'm just like, okay, so $75 just to apply. And then I already know in advance I'm going to get rejected because someone was straight enough to say I'm not qualified according to their standards. So I'm just like, okay, so my 5 science degrees don't count for anything to address cultural issues. You want some guy who knows Greek and Hebrew. And so anyway, that began.
The reason they wouldn't let you in, Sal, is because they teach from Walton's book.
Please explain to the viewers Walton's book briefly.
And I know this for a fact because I have a colleague who went to Liberty and got their master's in, I don't remember exactly which one of their fields, but they use Walton's book as their textbook on Genesis. And I've also heard unofficially through back channels that their master's programs are also teaching social justice.
So what is Walton's book?
Walton. Okay, so this would probably be the Lost World of the Flood or the Lost World of Genesis. I'm not sure which one they're using. I wasn't informed exactly, but I suspect it would be one of those 2 books. And if you want thoughts on John Walton, there's an excellent article that I'm going to link in the chat. This is the only article I will link tonight. If you want more, feel free to get a hold of me. I'll be more than happy to bomb you with all this stuff. But this article comes from Is Genesis History, and it's entitled The Gnostic World of John Walton. And it is probably the best full takedown of everything Walton says in one article. It is just absolutely fantastic. But I want to back away from that just to kind of explain to you some of the stuff that Walton believes. Now, Walton teaches at Wheaton, which, by the way, is the same school that just recently removed a plaque honoring the 5 missionaries who were killed in South America, Jim Elliot, Nate Saint, etc., because it used the word savage to describe the people who killed them, which at the time, they were savages. But that's not allowed anymore. That's not politically correct. So they removed the plaque honoring them. But So Walton's view is that of course, he basically accepts everything that the evolutionists say is true, and then tries to spin it into the Bible, and it becomes essentially Gnosticism, which is what Sentinel Apologetics admitted to in my conversation with him. I didn't catch it at the time; I should have. But he basically said that in order to interpret the text, you've got to have a scholar, because you have to have somebody from the ancient Near East who knows ancient Near Eastern literature tell you what the Bible means. And by the way, this is the same thing CRT does. You have to have an intellectual scholar tell you how to interpret the Bible in light of CRT. You can't actually read the Bible and understand it for yourself. It's two forms of Gnosticism. In both cases, there's a secret hidden knowledge that can't be obtained by the people in the pew. Moody, oh no. Okay, Brady, if you want to find where Moody is, look up woke preacher clips. He's on Twitter. He's on Gab. That's actually that's his username. That's his username. He has some great.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Emory. That was just sounded too funny.
It's true. Where do you think I get half my material? But he has some clips of some really woke social justice stuff going on at Moody. Don't go to Moody. Moody's been pretty bad for a while. They're getting worse now. So I look that up. I don't have those prepared. I wasn't prepared to discuss Moody, but I know they exist. So go look into that, Brady. But here's some of the stuff that Walton believes. Like, this is from reading a textbook that he and a couple of other people from Wheaton wrote, Understanding Scientific Theories of Origins. It's a theistic evolution college textbook, essentially. All right. So let me just read you a few things out of here. Start with this. Nevertheless, the early chapters of Genesis and these New Testament texts are at least as consistent with the view that God's initial creation was neither perfect nor complete. Rather, it was the appropriate or best starting point from which creation could become the new creation as it is called to be in the Son, as enabled by the Spirit.
Wow.
And we could also go to this one, which is more Gnosticism. Some might argue that Genesis 1:30 indicates that there was no carnivory pre-fall, but this text does not rule out carnivorous behavior among animals. Now, if you read Genesis 1 and verse number 30, let me just read you what it says. And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so. Does that sound like vegetarianism to you? See, but you can't, in this Gnostic world these scholars live in, you can't read the text of Scripture and understand it. They have to tell you what it means.
And I just wanted to say, I'm beginning to see clearly now what's going on. And what's sad is we will have conservative viewpoints, like in a place like Liberty, among certain faculty. Mm-hmm. But then the other sets of faculty, this happens at a lot of colleges, the other sets of faculty who set certain curricula have a very different view. So I'm disappointed to hear about Walton.
Well, I will also drop a bomb because I have some inside sources. Recently, I don't know if it's still going on, but recently a supposedly creationist member of the faculty was using BioLogos videos at Liberty to teach his biology classes. Not creationist material, BioLogos material. Yeah. So,
well, I'd be curious to hear. I mean,
I'm not.
If it's done in a critical way,
I don't want to burn anybody, so I'm not going to reveal exactly the information. But like, my sources are impeccable.
Well, it depends if it's in a friendly light or not. I mean,
no. So what happened was this particular individual started using these BioLogos videos with no rebuttal. They were just assigned to be watched. Someone else on the faculty got very upset.
Good on them.
And made us think about it. So the videos were assigned, but then something else was assigned to watch thereafter. And then more BioLogos videos were assigned thereafter that.
Yeah, I don't know what to I'm kind of open-minded, but if a university advertises itself to be a young Earth creation university. That's just not cool.
I don't think Liberty still calls itself a YEC university. I'm not sure that it does, but I mean, I know there are still creationists who teach there. Like I think Dave DeWitt still teaches there. He's a young Earth creationist.
For the record, and I just need to confess this because I know you might not have the same view. I had no problem with an old Earth creationist teacher who's ID friendly teaching at Liberty. The question came up specifically because we were trying to get Dr. Carolyn Crocker, who got dismissed from George Mason University. We're trying to get her a job somewhere, and she told me she can't, in good conscience, go there because she doesn't believe the Earth is young. And we had a lot of conversation. She said, "Sal, why do you believe this?" She wasn't hostile to young Earth creationists at all. You know, just like a lot of people, she just
right. Like
so, but you know, I get it. But the point is, if you're a university and that's what you sign up to teach, you teach it. You don't bait and switch. So on those grounds, that would have been wrong, even though.
Right, and it's not like they're using, like, I'm strongly opposed to old Earth. Like, I'm going to take a different position on this than you do, Sal. But, like, it's not like they're using Hugh Ross material here. They're using openly theistic evolution. Yeah. Like, this is theistic evolution material. Like, this is garbage material.
And I do want to, you know, I reach out to my old Earth. I know that there are a lot of old Earth subscribers here, and some of them I regard very highly, particularly because I've worked on the physics problem and I know how daunting. So with the abiogenesis thing, you'll see me really confident. I don't know that I could score very well in a debate on old Earth. I'll tell you that's what I believe, but it's not like the way I would prosecute abiogenesis. We just steamroll the other side. And I totally respect that there are Christians that work in the fields of geology and physics. And a lot of them have said to me, they said, I'd totally be on board with young Earth. I'm just not there from my training. And I totally respect that because I was there for a long time. So I'm more patient with people. I can kind of sense where their hearts are, you know, versus someone like Swami Das, who I've gotten very negative on.
Understandable.
But so I just wanted to let people know, if you're an old Earth creationist, you're welcome here. I'm much more compassionate, and you know, some people will argue the scriptures, and I'll say, you know, we can have that argument, but I think the way I like to approach it is, if I can make the data show you that there's a good chance the Earth is young, I know that if your heart's in the right place, you'll be on board, because that's what happened to me. It just takes a long time. And sometimes it takes a breakthrough in the data sets that we have in hand, because like 40 years ago, we didn't have any data. 20 years ago, though, there started to be some things, and I began to be more favorable. And then more data came in, and then I said, okay, at this point, that's enough. I'm going to take the risk. I can believe this now. And that's just where I am as a human being. And, you know, that's just the way I'm wired. That being said, I want to go to this article on seminaries, and then we'll close the show. I know this is such a long article, I don't think I can get through it all.
Sal, if you want to link it to me in the private chat, I can read it, so you don't have to.
Oh, yeah. Emory can talk so much faster than I can. And let me see if I can link it in the private chat. Thank you. Thank you for volunteering.
Well, you can just tell me to shut up whenever you want to say something.
So let me click on the private chat. As some of you know, I do have sometimes a slight speech impediment, and so I'm really glad for someone like Emory. And I do apologize that the font is so light, and unfortunately, that's nothing.
Sal, I might have to put glasses on my glasses to read this.
I can read it then. Why you shouldn't?
No, it's fine. I'll read. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. I'm picking. I can. And there's a way you can go into Chrome and zoom it up a little bit, which is what I'm gonna do. So, all right. So this is from 2009, folks. So some of these concerns are ongoing, shall we say. Starting with the top of the post. The title of this post is bound to raise some ire, but it's time to call a spade a spade. I'm writing this post because of numerous conversations I've had in the past 2 years with people who feel that a calling from God toward Christian ministry and assume that going to seminary is the natural next step. By the way, folks, just as a quick pause, this is me inserting commentary, and Sal can shut me up if he doesn't like it. Find me that verse in Scripture where you have to go to seminary to be in ministry.
Amen.
Just a quick thought. Anyway, here's one example. A young man in our church is about to graduate from Bible college, and he wants to serve in pastoral ministry. Last week, he told a friend of mine he's planning on going to seminary next year. Wanting to be helpful, my friend asked what his criteria were for choosing a seminary. He had no idea. That speaks to him. I mean, okay, he's 21, 22 years old, probably, maybe even younger. So maybe I give him a little bit of a pass. But if you're going to go to seminary, you better bloody well know what you're getting into. And unfortunately, most people do not. And I think that's the point. This isn't an isolated incident. Christians have a nebulous perception that a seminary degree is like a union card for pastoral ministry. Newsflash, it's not. In fact, in Acts 29, we find that church planters without a seminary degree are often more successful than those with a degree. Now, I'm not sure where that's coming from in Acts 29, so let me look that up real quick. Sal, if you want a commentary at this point while I look that up. Smart. Acts 29 doesn't exist. That would be why.
Oh.
That's the point. That's the point. Again, I've not been to seminary, so maybe I should. I don't know all the chapter numbers. I was just saying, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know that.
Good call. Good call.
Oh my! So that's well done, well played, well played. I wonder how many seminary grads read over that and thought, "Oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. That passage clearly doesn't say that." I find that's very clever. I like that.
Oh, no, I will interject here.
Go ahead.
I was complaining to the elders of my church about the seminaries. Now, in the local congregation I'm a part of, 4 of the 6 pastors are not vocational, meaning they don't get paid by the church. Mm-hmm. They're volunteering their time, but they are nominated as elders, and they don't have seminary degrees. They are attorneys. They are They are senior military officers. One was the vice president of USA Today. Mm-hmm. He resigned recently because he's a Christian and he just couldn't take it anymore. But I mean, he was just very accomplished, and so he moved up the corporate ladder very quickly because he's gifted. And he was an elder at our church. And one of the elders said, "I've not been impressed with these seminary students. They're rude, and they just have no manners, and they seem to be clueless." I was like, "Oh my goodness, you said it so well." And that was my impression too. So it was amazing to hear this from a non-vocational elder. So please go on. Yep.
All right. So continuing on in the seminary, I have to refine where I was because I was reading the comments on the article, which there are a ton.
The Acts 29 one.
Yes, Acts 29. Readers are going to have to forgive me for some overgeneralizations in this post. What I'm going to say is not true of all seminaries, all seminary graduates, or all potential seminary attendees. I am not anti-seminary. I have a seminary degree myself, and I cherish the education and spiritual formation that it provided me. But it's time for someone to challenge the standard assumptions. First things first, theological training is a must for anyone called to the pastorate. Pastors who don't have a deep grasp of history, theology, and philosophy are simply unqualified. That's probably true. That's a strong statement, but it's probably true. Titus, or maybe not philosophy, but definitely for theology.
Not philosophy. Agreed.
Yeah.
They don't need more of Danny. I'm sorry, Danny.
Danny, I love you, but you would not make a good pastor. And not just because you're not a Christian. Titus 1:9 requires that all who serve in the office of elder, pastor, must be able to, quote, give instruction in sound doctrine, and also to rebuke those who contradict it. And I happen to know that Titus 1:9 is a real Bible passage, unlike the last one. read it to you real quick. Holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. And so let me just pause here real quick. Like the Bible lays out some pretty strong qualifications for pastor. Now, some of that's got some leeway for a little bit of interpretation, but not much of it, folks. Right? And we got a lot of pastors who don't meet the qualification. Just pointing that out. And a lot of them went to seminary, or cemetery, should I say. Moving on with the article. According to Richard Lovelace, Christianity quickly lost its influence after the Second Great Awakening because the, quote, leadership of lay evangelists without formal theological training, quote, led to a progressively shallower spirituality among evangelicals and to a loss of intellectual command. I would actually strongly disagree with that, but that's not the point of the article, so I'm not going to go there. Pastors work in the world of ideas. They are guardians of a storied theological heritage and teachers of philosophy of life. Education is a must. I would actually disagree with that, too. Because if education is a must to be a pastor, I don't think that the original pastors were qualified to be pastors.
And that's very interesting. You know, one of the most powerful preachers I ever heard, and just like almost from the first few sentences he uttered, I was just impressed, and I didn't mean to insult him. I was like, you must have gone to the best seminaries. Of course, I was naive then. Mm-hmm. Because he was so gifted. He said, I just have an associate's degree. And it turned out he was a lawn care specialist. That's how he made his living. But the guy had a heart, and he had great reverence for the word, and he taught almost straight. He taught from the Bible with minimal commentary, but his comments were very accurate.
And folks, you can't teach heart. You can't teach reverence for Scripture. That's either generated internally or it's not there at all.
Yeah.
And so you cannot teach that. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. And like this is a whole thing where seminaries can only, you can educate a man, but you can't give him a heart.
Amen.
Raman, get SFT to invite me then, because SFT's got my email, but I don't hear from him too often. So if he wants me to come on and talk about it, you got to convince him. Like send him enough super chats until he feels guilty about it. Since you're always sending him super chats. By the way, don't actually do that unless you really want to. Okay, that was me that's me joking. Okay, don't do that unless you want to, especially since it costs you money. All right. But anyway, that's just my little mini joke. But anyway, we'll move back to the article, which is what we're here for. So I'm not denying the importance of sound, rigorous theological training. I'm simply questioning whether seminary is the place to get it. And here I agree with him. Here are some of his concerns. Quote, number one, seminary pulls pastors, quote, off the streets for 3 to 4 years to isolate them in a sterile academic environment. While this might be great for paper writing, it's really bad for missional living. I'd agree with that. I'd also argue that it produces an elitist sense in these people where they think they're better than their congregants because they've got some kind of they spent so much time in academia.
Yes, and I've heard some seminary students preach and just like, you're trying to encourage the congregation here and exhort them. You just gave a grammar lesson. It was terrible, and I so.
Right, and there's a place for understanding Greek grammar. There's a place for understanding Hebrew grammar. Like there's a place for that. I'm not saying you. And I know Sal's not saying this either. But you can't make that the focus of your sermon and expect people to like get anything out of it. Like these people have to go and live their lives.
Yeah, and what I wanted to say is you don't have to do. All you have to do is just all you have to do is say, okay, I've read this. This is the way I would say it in English. Simple.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They don't have to be trying to impress people with their knowledge of grammar and all the syntax and go on.
Point number 2, the nature of the business means that seminaries are always juggling the best interests of students, faculty, donors, and accrediting agencies. These players are never in agreement, which means that no one is ever happy.
And donors is a big one.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect the reason that some of these seminaries are moving certain directions is there's there's a money trail there, big money trail.
Yes, it has been suggested that certain well-known leftist donors have been pumping money into certain evangelical institutions in order to influence their direction. Not been conclusively demonstrated, but there's some hints that that's going on. So,
well, this, if you even contribute, like say 0.5% or some sizable amount, that'll get the attention of the president and say, oh, okay, so you would like a little more of this, hint, hint. The donors say, oh, by the way, here's my donation. We would like a little more of this.
Yep. And it's the same thing that happens with politicians. Like if you're a politician and somebody gives you, 1% of your campaign budget, you're going to pay attention to what that person says. Brady, I will neither confirm nor deny that statement. Just look into it a little bit, and you can figure out whether a certain Hungarian American financier is behind this or not. You can figure that out on your own. Anyways, point number 3. Seminaries seek to accomplish theological training apart from immersion in a local church. Though most require their students to be active in a church, seminaries tend to be a breeding ground for Monday morning theologians who want to critique the church rather than serve it.
That was the best point.
Bingo.
It's like, if you want to train someone for the pastorship, let them serve the church. Yeah. Let them be in the practice of serving the church. Yep. That's my feeling.
Yeah. So let me ask you a rhetorical question. How did Titus and Timothy and some of these other church pastors in the New Testament learn to be pastors? From Paul. They learned from serving alongside of Paul.
And that's going to be pointed out here.
Yep.
It's going to point out the people that will mentor you to be a good pastor are good pastors, not seminary professors or your seminary student peers.
Yep. Then there's this one. Because professors are pressured to publish and gain tenure, the classes they teach are often little more than laboratories for their latest projects. One seminary student... Yeah, I bet that's probably true, honestly. And that's true even in evangelical circles, because we've made publishing such a big deal, and we made dissertations such a big deal, because we're trying to sound, intelligent to the world that is going to think our message is foolishness, regardless of what we say. Right? The message of the cross is to them that perish foolishness. So it doesn't matter how many PhDs and degrees we accumulate. The world is still going to think our message is foolishness. But we in evangelicalism have decided that degrees are hyper important, and we need to sound like we're intelligent to, keep up with the world. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with getting a PhD, but in order to get a PhD, you have to write something new. You know what that means, folks? That means all kind of wacky ideas get tossed out by by quote unquote seminary professors who are evangelicals working on their PhD that have no basis in scripture, no basis in reality, no basis in anything, but they toss it out there to get their PhD dissertation approved. You want to know where all this wacky stuff is coming from in evangelicalism? Read through some of these guys' PhDs.
That's a systemic problem.
Yep, that's a systemic. That is a real systemic problem. Unlike the systemic racism that these people talk about, that is a real systemic problem. Anyway, moving on. One seminary student in our church told me that every one of his classes this semester uses a book written by the professor. Oh, so just to go back to like my mini rants earlier, I didn't get to this. But this kind of ties in. Shaw University Divinity School, the dean of the school wrote a fawning biography of Barack Obama. And then on Amazon, there's one review of the book that he wrote and gave himself a 5-star rating. I mean, there it is for you, folks. I mean, these guys said it's all about, in this case, and that one also pads their pockets.
Yep.
Because if a student is required to purchase a textbook for a class, they're going to purchase it. And when they purchase it, the professor gets a kickback if it's his book. Now, I'm not saying that he shouldn't get a kickback for writing a book. He wrote a book. He should get, when somebody buys it, he should get paid for it. But he shouldn't compel people to buy it. He's essentially padding his own pockets while also indoctrinating his students in whatever garish ideology he's throwing out there. It's a win-win for him, but it's a lose-lose for the student. Anyways, next point. Seminaries have to pay the bills, which means it's in their best interest to keep students around as long as possible.
Oh,
yeah.
No kidding.
Okay, so some of you know that I went to a very conservative college, which also has an MDiv program and an undergraduate pastoral program. It came out in like my junior year that there was an individual who was, I think, a year behind me. He was in his second semester of his sophomore year, who denied the Trinity, who was in the pastoral program. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, he apparently did not deny it when he signed on. This is apparently something he just decided to do while he was there. So they didn't admit him believing that, or he lied on his sign-in, one of the two. But he was, and my school was very much a Trinitarian school. And what's the take? Well, I'll answer your question here in a second. Instead of immediately booting him, they tried to essentially massage him through to the end of the semester, and then he was asked not to come back. Because the way the payment system worked, you paid periodically as you went through the semester, so they basically got an extra half semester's worth of payment out of him. And this is, by the way, a conservative school. Imagine what the liberal schools are doing.
Goodness.
Okay? Now,
there's something to the commenter's question here.
Mm-hmm.
He had a let me see. The comment was let me see, what was it?
Do you think there are any worthwhile seminaries? That was the question.
Okay, this article will address it. So if we could read on, you'll see it. It's actually a very good answer. It's a very good answer.
When we get there, I'll talk about what I think about that here in just a second. Seminaries continue to promote the MDiv as the, quote, flagship degree, even though a 2-year MA with well-chosen electives is often just as good and about $15,000 cheaper. That depends on where you go. In a lot of places, it'd be cheaper than that. It'd be a lot cheaper than that, as a matter of fact, because a lot of places you have to have a 4-year undergraduate MA. You have to have a 4-year undergraduate degree before you even get to the MA, let alone the MDiv. Seminary graduates tend to exit with their heads full of theology, but without worshipful hearts or authentic relationships with non-Christians. I'm aware this is an overgeneralization, but unfortunately it's an accurate one. There's a lot to unpack here. I don't think they necessarily have to have authentic relationships with quote-unquote non-Christians, but I think they need to have a servant's heart. There's no mention of that, but I think they really need to have a servant's heart coming out. Like, I think that's the main point of being a pastor. Like, you're supposed to be a shepherd of the church and supposed to have a heart of service for the church. And I don't think a lot of them come out of seminary or cemetery with that. They just don't. Moving on. Next. Because of a seminary's need to cater to a diverse student body, most seminaries can't offer a truly systematic theological education. Students end up having to piece together the fragmented bits of data they've accumulated in so many haphazard, out-of-sequence courses. The idea of a cohesive body of learning is all but lost in the modern academy. This is true, by the way, outside of just seminaries. Okay? I took, as part of my degree, I took a bunch of classes that had zero to do with biology in my undergraduate. 2 semesters of literature classes. All right? Let's see. Now, my college required me to take a Bible class every semester, so that's a plus. So I got a little bit of Bible that way. But I took 3 history classes. Actually, 4 semesters of history classes. I take that back. 5. 5 separate history classes. 5. 2 social science electives. Now, admittedly, one of them was sort of Bible-based because it was marriage and family, which is hilarious because I'm not married. But, so those classes didn't really do anything for me when it comes to science. Like, yeah, it's nice to have that history background. And, I understand requiring 2 semesters of it. The rest of it wasn't required, but they were social science electives that I could take. As I told my dean, can I take science classes instead? And he told me no. So, like, I would have much rather taken science classes, but my degree course required that I take non-science classes. Now, thankfully, in the master's program, I'm only required to take two explicitly not completely science classes. Like, one of them was, intro to graduate studies, which was somewhat useful, and then biostatistics, which is kind of sort of science-ish.
Now this is the best part coming up here.
Yeah, moving on here. So let's move down because I know Sal needs to go to bed.
And this will answer what's the takeaway.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Are there any worthwhile seminaries? This is the money line here, in my opinion.
The seminary model is a tired one that needs to be updated for a post-Christian technological age. Here's a possible way forward.
Yes, that's it. Mm-hmm. It's a tired model.
Yes.
So go on.
This next sentence is brilliant. The primary place for pastoral training and development should be within the local church. Wow, what a biblical thought. I mean, guys, really, like, I get that seminaries are useful and all, but come on. Good theologically astute elders can guide aspiring leaders through a year or two of seminary-level reading and study without ever removing them from their church body.
Bravo.
And I've been in some churches that have had like their own little mini Bible institute that they do, where they take qualified men, and they do this. But those churches, a lot of them would be looked at as like really fringe churches because they're more fundamentalist in thought process. But I don't see any evangelical churches doing it. Moving on. Rather than paying thousands of dollars for a packaged seminary education, aspiring leaders can get exactly the same level of reading and study, minus the classroom interaction, for free, with the added bonus of mentorship and community with others in their local church.
Amen. There is a lot of good material for free.
Yeah.
Or like, you could just buy books.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And who would be your good guide? You work for a good pastor, he'll tell you, this book helped me to do this. It helped me deal with these sort of problems or help other people. Because I've heard some of the things that they've assigned in seminary. I'm just like, oh, how's that going to help the church again?
Or we could just go back to the list of classes that I read off earlier that were reading about talking about spiritualism.
Yeah.
How is this going to help you at all? Matter of fact, it's going to harm you. It's actively going to harm you.
So I mean, this may just sound. I really do commend. I commend people that have gone through seminary and some of the things that they've learned. But I think what they are saying is it's a tired model, and there's some systemic things about it that make it not efficient. Mm-hmm. And when they pointed out that thing of like, okay, they really want to keep students there as long as possible. That's sadly true and not good.
Right. Yep.
So, what would you learn in the seminary that you might not learn in a local church? If you really want to learn Greek and Hebrew,
right. and
you can go to like, say, you might have to. I mean, there's a very fine biblical scholar who learned Hebrew. He had to go away to learn it, and I totally get that. But do you want to learn about Trinitarian theology? Do you really have to go to a classroom and sit? But I totally get you might need this to learn Greek and Hebrew.
I'll be honest with you, you don't need it to learn Greek and Hebrew. You might need it for Hebrew. Hebrew's probably a little bit harder than Greek. But my brother, who is fairly bright, but he's not. My brother is terrible with languages. Like, my brother went to a particular school, and he had to take 4 semesters of Spanish as part of his degree. He got out of that in the Spanish Honors Society, National Spanish Honors Society, without speaking a lick of Spanish. He doesn't speak a word of Spanish. Like, he might know the C and whatever, but that's about it. But he's terrible with languages, but he's teaching himself Greek, and he's got a tutor to help him. You don't need seminaries for this. You really don't. Now, I can understand if you want to go be more than just a pastor, if you want to be like a theologian and you want to be like a real somebody who's like doing all the academic work and whatnot in it, okay, yes, seminary might be valuable to you at that point. But if your goal is just to be a pastor of a local church or an evangelist, or even just to like educate yourself on theology so that you're more useful inside your own church, you don't need seminary for that. In the internet age, heck, you don't even need an individual church Bible institute. You can go read commentaries. You can go listen to lectures. You can go watch classes online, right? And he goes through some more of this here in a second.
And who would be the one to guide you if you have a pastor that is?
Yeah.
That was the golden part.
Yep.
If you're in a good church and you have a good pastor, that's the one who will tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And like I said, in my local congregation, we have non-vocational pastors.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm surprised I'm surprised at their insights. They're very well read in many areas collectively. And by the way, these guys are brave too. One of them nearly got assassinated because his day job's working for the Family Research Council, and there was an assassination attempt.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? Oh,
yeah. If you all look at Floyd Lee Corkins, that was the assailant. He's the Chick-fil-A assassin. He went in there. He's going to kill everyone in the Family Research Council. That would have been one of my elders.
Yeah.
And he,
fortunately, he did a very bad job of it.
Praise God.
Yeah.
So
a few times I'm very thankful that someone was an abject failure at what they were trying to do.
So we're not against education. I'm interested in improving the education of the pastors and their path to serving. And what ends up happening, and I didn't really understand this, that certain denominations will not, they're just their policy. It's like, okay, we'll hire someone from these seminaries. They're cleared. If not, we're not going to hire them as our pastor. And I kind of get that. They want someone else to do the vetting work for them.
Like, okay, I understand on one level where you do that, like, because you say, okay, this person already should believe the same things we do, so they don't have to check them out on those things. Now, I would suggest that you do, given that some of the stuff I read off about the seminaries, I would suggest you vet them anyway. You really should vet them anyway. But I understand on that level you want to make the job a little bit easier, but really, guys, I mean.
Okay, this is a good question. How do we tell the good ones from the Ravi Zacks? I think sometimes the bad ones slip through. Yeah. And that's just, we just pray they don't do a lot of damage. I will tell you this. Sometimes the family and sadly, sometimes the church will cover up, that happens, which is really bad. And so I'm going to just tell this because this is public knowledge now. One of my pastors, this is a funny story because he was doing this whole thing on biblical counseling. And some of the stuff he said, I said, oh, Lord, I hope he doesn't counsel husbands and wives, because he got it totally wrong on obsessive compulsive disorder. And it's something that I understand because I was studying neuroscience at the NIH. And I was like, this guy's clueless, Lord. But I said, I'm not going to be the first one to cast a stone. It's really not my place to. I've got logs in my own eye. I'm not going to take a speck out in his. But I don't know, just the thought came to my mind. I said, Lord, I hope he doesn't counsel. Because if he handles the counseling of husbands and wives like the way he's dealing with certain mental disorders, he's going to botch it. But really around a year later, I got this strange sets of emails going on. I didn't know what was going on. Finally, the elders weighed in and said, he's been removed from being an elder. And they said, just please talk to us privately. So at the time it was really kind of private. It's public now. So I'm not sharing anything that's not way out in the public. He got called, the police got called to his home because he was beating his wife and kids. And what had happened, and again, this is in public blogs, he was beating his wife before they got married and while he was in seminary. And his wife was covering for him. So, yeah. How do we tell the good ones from the bad? It's really kind of scary. I really do think he was very sincere toward the congregation in his office, but he treated his family terribly. And so some of these people, they may have a grain of sincerity, but then they have their faults, and that's what's seen in the Bible. It says in the Bible that Solomon loved the Lord. Of course, that was early in his life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And when he got old, he started serving other gods. So it's also one of these things where someone may start out right and then they end up being a bad apple, which is really, really sad. So
I'll just weigh in here a little bit.
Yeah.
Like I was never a Robbie fan. Like I didn't like Robbie. I didn't have a reason. I just didn't like him. But like, just as a general rule of thumb, like there's a reason the phrase wolf in sheep's clothing exists. And like sometimes, like I think there were people at RZIM who either knew or should have known, based on some of the behavior that's been reported publicly. But in some cases, like nobody's going to know, and there's nothing that there's only so much you can do on this level. And this isn't just for pastors. Like this goes for everybody, like across the corporate world. I mean, if we just take a step back here, like how many people knew that Harvey Weinstein was abusing women? It was like an open secret in Hollywood. Everybody knew, but nobody did anything. Right. And unfortunately that culture sometimes will seep over into the church as well, where people are not held accountable, or people are either aren't held accountable, or there's no accountability put in place. And I think that you need to if you're a pastor or if you're a leader in a church in any way, shape, or form, put accountability in place around yourself. Like, go out of your way to put accountability in place around yourself.
This is amazing, because I actually really liked Robbie. I thought he was the best. And so you guys had better discernment than I did on this one. In contrast, there was, I mentioned Josh Harris. From day one, I just got bad feelings about the guy. Couldn't, then I read his book, I got even worse feelings. Yeah. And then he ended up being, he gave a manual on dating and marriage. He ended up, let me see what came first. I think he announced his leaving from Christianity, and then next announced his divorce from his wife, or vice versa.
And then showed up.
I knew the guy was a bad apple, but so I have to say, Mr. Jetty, that was pretty sharp. I did not pick that up at all.
Yeah, I've heard that from some other people. For me, like I didn't listen to him very often because he wasn't a YEC. So, when I was getting into apologetics, which was fairly recent, I knew he wasn't a YEC. So I'm like, I'm just not wasting my time, because but when I did listen to him, I was like, something.
Oh my goodness, I got to say the same, Mr. Jetty, and I'm
I would agree with that.
Me and Tommy Das are on good terms, but the first time I encountered him, I got just the creeps. And I said, Sal, you're just being, don't be quick don't rush to judgment. I just got, oh my goodness. I think now my initial vibrations were trying to really tell me something.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I kind of had the same, now, admittedly, in regards to Swami Das, I knew he was a TE, so I immediately turned off of him because of that. And then I read his comment that I read on your stream the other night about abortion, and went, "Oh my word, this guy!" So I lost it, and at that point I was done. But I think everybody can be fooled. Everybody can be fooled. So don't think for me for saying for a second that I did bad feelings about Ravi and Swami Das means that I can't be fooled by somebody else.
Yeah, and this is really kind of sad, and it's in a way I'm kind of thankful I don't have a lot of knowledge in this, meaning I've not had people close to me having to deal with some of the real garbage. And, this is a family friendly channel. We don't need to talk about certain things, but for the viewers there, I highly recommend jennifergreenberg.net. She talks about those issues with pastors that are, really sketchy on that other end. And we don't need to, all right, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
She was a victim, and she knows other victims in the church. And the reason I say that is I'm not the right person to be able to, I can talk stuff about biochemistry. I'm not the right person to talk about those issues and offer comfort. And I'm so glad that, she can address those topics better than mine.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. One thing, people tend to be able to, that have gone through certain trials, they may be a little bit better qualified if a problem in the church comes up and you're in that church, you can help that person. So people like going through school and suffering through doubts because of what they're learning in class, I can help that. Someone who's had addiction problems and gone through it, they might be better to help someone else. So it's sometimes we shouldn't necessarily expect the pastor to solve all our problems. God may be providing people that can help. That should be common sense. That's just my opinion too.
Right. And that fits with what the Bible says. Not everyone is gifted to be a pastor. Not everyone is gifted to be an evangelist. We have all different members with one body, so everybody's got a different job. Like each part of the human body has a different role. None of it is vestigial leftovers, but each part of the human body has a defined role. As Paul says, if the whole were the hand, where with hearing? If the whole were the hearing, where with the smelling?
Okay, let me just address this because I know you're going to be verbose. Just briefly, we had a video on this. It was a Friday night to morning fellowship, and then also, what was the title of your show on your channel? Was it Labels?
I think it's TE once creationism labeled or something like that.
Right. So what happened with Swami Das? He's trying to get some of the policies he's advocating would be de-accrediting Christian colleges because they teach creationism, and I boy, my opinion turned on him really fast, even more after that. I said that's inexcusable because the damage this could cause to people's careers and lives of fellow Christians, totally needless. And for what? To advocate evolutionary theory and abiogenesis theory? That's just not right. And I had said he better be 100 million% sure that abiogenesis and evolutionary theory is God's truth before he starts destroying Christian colleges to promote it.
Yeah.
So let's go on because this is actually a really good article.
Yeah, this is a really good article. Getting back to where we were. Let's see here. I'm trying to remember where we were. Okay, so here we go. Regionally influential churches should band together to host theological training academies, similar to what a particular group he mentions here, Mars Hill X29, has begun to do with RE Train. Cadres of a couple dozen students can fly top-notch professors in, wine them and dine them, and pay a hefty honorarium for their labor, and still come out way ahead of the $400 to $500 per credit hour that seminaries charge. And if you're like $400 to $500, it's more probably like at this point it's probably like $600 to $700, because I know that's like 600 and something is what I'm paying per credit in graduate school credits right now. So I'd assume credit seminaries are on the same general ish plane. Now some seminaries will be cheaper because they're trying to keep the price down for people, but yeah, so like that's probably about right. And by the way, that's a genius idea. Have a guy who's really experienced come in for a seminar for a weekend or whatever. And the thing is, you get to interact with him not just in the classroom but at dinner. You take him out to dinner, you get to pick his brain over dinner rather than just in a formal lecture setting. And a lot of times that's a lot more valuable than listening to a guy drone on about some point of Greek grammar. Moving on to the next point. Theological students should use technology to access, quote unquote, the best of the best teachers and theologians. Many seminaries offer lectures free through iTunes U. Others allow students to audit classes via video conferencing. If you want to learn systematic theology from Wayne Grudem, church history from John Hanna, and apologetics from John Frame, why not?
Yes. By the way,
go ahead.
That is the known trend that academia on the whole is resisting. They know now because of technology, you can get the very best professor teaching top-notch lectures and it really is a step down to go to most typical classrooms that are taught by some graduate student that can't really speak English very well. Because we import a lot of graduate students. No dissing on them in that sense. They've never taught the class before, and they're kind of having to relearn the material, and they'd rather be trying to complete their doctoral dissertation. So I've heard comments that this trend could be, if it's let to go in favor of the students, it's going to change things. And this is exactly, this would be a favorable trend where you learn things from the very best person available in terms of lecture. There are some things you learn where you actually have to do exercises, like, say, writing. That's a skill that, it may help to have a teacher kind of coax you along and check your homework. But, in terms of learning ideas.
To be honest, though, like, as a pastor, writing is not a required skill. Being able to write an outline for a sermon probably is, but being able to put your thoughts down on paper in a coherent format, unless you're planning on writing a book or you're planning on, writing out your sermon notes or whatever, that's not a required skill. Just pointing that out. Moving on, seminaries should continue to hire and equip the best and brightest academic minds in Christianity to do battle on the field of ideas. We need good theologians doing high-level academic work, and seminaries provide an important context for that. But rather than paying the bills by lassoing directionless Bible college grads for a 3-year MDiv, ouch, they should focus their recruiting efforts on doctoral students, pastors who want ongoing training, and a la carte students who would pay to access the wisdom and expertise of the most talented professors in a given field. Seminaries could cut all the adjunct faculty and retain only the best and brightest thinkers.
Oh,
that burn on adjunct faculty. Anybody who's adjunct faculty should. But the thing is, the way the seminaries work, that, like, you start out as adjunct faculty. So, like, yeah. But anyway, so how would this change the face of theological education? Right now, an aspiring pastor goes into the poorhouse, and that's true, to fund a 3-year MDiv, only to come out less equipped in many ways than when he went in.
Ouch.
Yeah, double ouch. Imagine if that same aspiring pastor spent 2 years studying theology under the direction of his local church elders, then a 3rd year taking electives from the, quote, best of the best professors at various seminaries available through distance ed or short on-site intensives. He would avoid debt, which is, by the way, a very biblical principle. Stay connected to the local church, continue to grow as a missionary and worshiper, not just as a theologian, and still come out with a top-notch education and a much better pedigree for missional leadership. I would largely agree with that, except I'll go even a step further and say, you don't need the 3rd step. You can read their books. These guys all write books. I mean,
yeah,
most of them do anyway. You can, if you really want to learn what these guys think on topic X, read their book. That's a lot cheaper than a seminary credit. I guarantee you, their book does not cost $500. Wayne Grudem's Systematic Theology is this monstrous book, probably what 600-700 pages or something like that. I don't know. I don't own it, but I've seen the thing. It's huge. That book, I guarantee you, does not cost the $1,800 you would pay for Systematic Theology 101, which would be a 3-credit class.
And let me share this. Praise God, I got my master's degree in applied physics a while ago when it was still marginally affordable. Yeah. The books I still have, I'm just like, oh my goodness, they can still teach me so much just by rereading them. And actually, I've had to put this on the shelf. I'm trying to teach chemistry in my other channel, and it's just wonderful. You can learn so much. Oh, this is something SJ. Do you know SJ Tomlinson? She's a professor.
I know who she is. I know she gets attacked by a lot of the internet atheists.
That's not just because she's good, but really, unfortunately, she started her social media stuff with Twitter, and her 20,000 followers were atheists. I don't know that I think the minority, very small minority fraction were Christians. So what ends up, Twitter is like trigger, so to speak. So
Twitter
if you
is
say
the
something
armpit
that
of the internet.
you trigger someone, you're going to get a lot of followers who aren't there because they like you. And that's sort of what happened. But anyway, she is a professor of business and she's also been a dean. And she says the way to learn is to teach. So she's president of an association that is called Learn by Teaching. And there's a saying that if you really want to learn a subject, you teach it. And I'm finding that to be true. And many people have said that. I've never heard anyone say the contrary. And so one way to get a good education then is, as you said, read the book. And if you want to teach it, get on YouTube and teach it. You may not have an audience, but you do it. I have a really tiny audience, sometimes 10 views for my for my chemistry lectures. And but I do it primarily for my own benefit. And if someone is able to benefit on the side, that's great. So just wanted to point that out. So I'm with you right there. Get the book.
Yeah, exactly. And the book's going to be a whole lot cheaper. I don't know how much Wayne Grudem's systematic theology would cost. Guarantee you it's less than 3 college credits. And if Grudem was your professor, guess what? You'd have been using his book, so you'd have to pay for it anyway. And another thing, just as a side note, professors are like anybody else. When they write something, they love to talk about what they wrote. What that means is, if you don't understand something in a book that you read, you can send them an email. And a lot of times they'll respond. Because they're like anybody else, they like to talk about what they wrote. And this works for scientists too. If you read a paper, now don't tell them you're a creationist, because they probably won't respond then. But if you I've done this, where I've read something that a scientist wrote, and I've gone, I don't completely get that. So I sent them an email and I said, hey, what's going on with this? They were thrilled that somebody was reading a paper they wrote 5 years ago. And they sent me a nice little explanation of the stuff that that I didn't understand. Now, again, you don't tell them you're a creationist. Just ask the question. But they will respond. A lot of them will. Moving on. When I was a sophomore engineering major at the University of Oklahoma, I contacted a family friend about a potential summer internship. He said, yeah, I'd love to have you come work for me because after you get your degree, I'm going to need you to unlearn everything you've learned anyway. And a lot of that is true, by the way. I've heard other engineers say that. I think George says that. What's his name? Joel says that. I've heard a lot of engineers say that. That's exactly how I feel about seminary graduates who are coming into a missional church planting movement. The model I've proposed certainly isn't flawless, and if you'd like to defend the current model or propose other alternatives, I'd love to hear from you. But the fact is that seminaries simply aren't producing the kind of leaders that missional church leaders are looking for. It's time for a change. And I would agree. Most of this is just not. Most of what comes out of seminary is garbage. Is just total garbage.
And says thoughts, disagreements, fire away. And the rest, you could see here that I'm only like 20% through the whole thing because the rest is comments.
Yeah, there are 51 comments on this thing.
So,
and they're still coming in. Like some of these comments are recent comments.
Yeah. Now, let me just give some of the viewers a perspective. My first job in the aerospace industry was training naval aviators how to use their weapons, standoff land attack missile, the harpoon missile, the high-speed anti-radiation missile. And I think there was one more and it escapes me. I'm embarrassed. It was a long time ago. What we found is if we went away from traditional classroom methods, we could train the pilots, some estimated 30 times faster than traditional classroom methods, 30 times faster. And the Defense Department recognized this because sometimes you might have a carrier aircraft pilot that is unfamiliar with the weapon system, and he doesn't have 2 months to learn how to fly a mission. It's like, you're going to fly this mission against Iraq tomorrow, by the way, or in 2 days. You got to learn how to do this. And you're not going to sit in the classroom and do this for a month and try to learn how to fire the missile and hit your target and to set it up.
Mm-hmm.
So we built these computer-based training systems that would analyze the pilot's knowledge. And as he's flying the aircraft, actually it's the aircrew, you'd have that particular aircraft, you had a pilot and a bombardier navigator. And so the team would be training to flip the right switches. The computer would diagnose if they're doing it in the right sequence, et cetera, which is really great because they could be on the simulator, and if they did the wrong switches, the simulator would demonstrate to them in one way or the other that they set this up wrong and the missile's not going to launch, or it's going to do something that you really didn't want. And sometimes it could be really bad. But the point is, that began to open the door to me because I've been hearing about alternative ways to teach people and to do it fast. So I'm not, I'm not saying that we should take down our institutions. We should look at other ways of teaching people and teaching them faster so that they can live their lives more productively. And, this is me, who's been through 5 degree programs, and I suffered through it. And, along that whole way, I said, is there a quicker way to learn some of this? Sometimes there's not a quicker way. I mean, learning general relativity, it's like, you just got to sit in front of the books and plow through it. But now looking back, it's like, there might have been a better way to do this. And I'm going to have a chance to experiment on one of my other channels, my Evidence Reasons Academy, figuring better ways. And even Dr. James Carter, who he's a professional educator in biochemistry and organic chemistry, he said, Sal, there really are better ways we can do this now that we have computer animations. So, this may not apply to seminary stuff, but, we're not attacking the institutions. We're trying to get people equipped to serve God.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I want to emphasize, we're not trying to deconstruct the institutions here. That's not the goal.
Yeah.
I think there's a role for seminaries.
But then, given what you gave earlier on the cemetery, the real cemetery,
I want to deconstruct those seminaries. But I don't want to deconstruct the institution of seminary as a whole. That's not my goal.
Right.
My goal is to refine it so that we can clean up the garbage, get rid of the bad stuff, and put forward and help people to serve God more effectively. I don't think everyone who is a pastor of a church needs to go to seminary. Matter of fact, I think most of them probably don't need to go to seminary.
Some of the best pastors I know never went to seminary. Or they were elected as pastors first, and then they went to seminary, which I was actually impressed with.
Yep.
While they were pastors, they were going to seminary after they got the job.
Yep. One particular, the best pastor I knew growing up, he was a full-time evangelist. That's what he did. And he'd come to our church. He came to our church every year because he had a really good relationship with our pastor. And he was a hillbilly from West Virginia. Now, he had a PhD. He never called himself PhD, but he did have one. But he didn't get that thing till he'd been going full-time for 20 years or something like that. He didn't need it. That wasn't what it was there for. He got it specifically so that the ministry he was working with at the time would be more marketable to bigger institutions where they want you to have a PhD. It's the only reason he went and got it.
And there's one thing interesting that is in the New Testament, and if I extrapolate this too far, feel free to disagree, but it's talking about the qualifications of being an elder and being able to manage your household, being able to manage your own household well.
Yes.
Uses the word well. And I was like, there's something to be said about life experience and also being out there in the world that's outside the clergy, because some of the best pastors, I didn't even know. I was like, who's this pastor? He's just so wonderful. And I only heard him once, but there's a spirit about him. And there was the way he taught, I found out, oh, he's not a professional pastor. And I realized one thing, that's a separate discussion, but I can understand the idea of tent making, because you're not worried about satisfying the congregation. It's like, okay, if they're doing stuff that isn't right, you're not worried about offending them and losing your donors.
Yes.
Okay.
So
his day job was, one of them was a teacher. Another was he was an electrical engineer, worked for a power plant. And another was another good one. He was a construction worker. And then another was, I mentioned him earlier. He's a lawn care person. He didn't make a lot of money, but God bless him. He was like, when I heard him, I'm just like, this is refreshing. I can't put my finger on it, but the spirit was right. And I was just really struck. And I said, that's the one thread that I got, was these guys that are just kind of in the grit of everyday life like everyone else. It resonated with me. Just thought I'd throw that in.
Well, I mean, I'll throw this in as well. I mean, some of the major creationist organizations have said this publicly, that they'll go to a church and the pastor will ask them not to talk about creation, not to talk about the age of the earth, because they'll have a T on their board of elders, or they'll have some big donor in the church is theistic evolutionist or whatever. And like at that point, I'm like, okay, this is why we need bivocational pastors, so you can say whatever the Bible says and not have to give a darn about what some bigwig in your church who's got a lot of money thinks about anything. Yep. But that's not going to fly, because that would require people to actually work hard, rather than, because I phrase this carefully. I think there are at least some people who go into the pastorate because it looks easy. Because all they see is the pastor getting up, and depending on what kind of church you're in, getting up one day a week, preaching a sermon for 20 minutes, and that's it. And they think that's the whole job of a pastor.
Yeah.
And I think there are some people who go into it because A, they aren't cut out for anything else, or B, they go into it because they think it's going to be an easy ride. An easy full-time job. And I'm sorry, it's not.
And one thing that's, I'm trying not to rag on pastors too much. I may, because I've had such bad experiences with them. I'd say I've had such bad experiences in church that I nearly left, and it's a traumatic thing for me to say that. Of late, I've tried to be a little bit more compassionate, because I read this survey. It said 80% of people that go into full-time ministry will quit after about 5 or 10 years. They'll be out as full-time. They may continue in some ministry role, but they won't be full-time anymore. It's just too much. And this was especially directed at pastors. And some of the reasons were like problems with the congregation. But if you're not, if you're worried about, if your main concern is to just teach the truth and not try to, people say, let's unity. The truth divides. The truth divides.
Amen.
And that's been a little bit hard for me to accept, because sometimes I want to water down what I say, because I said, I'm going to lose some subscribers. And I said, Sal, you don't want to go down that path even now.
Yep.
You have to think, you've got to stand on principle. And I mean, it might be like little things, and I'm just, for the sake of being open, what am I sort of talking about? If I know something about science and I'm hearing other creationists say it, just because they're other creationists, it's like, it doesn't mean I have to endorse it. They come on my channel or whatever, I have to say I disagree. Something as simple as that. I'm not going to try to say, oh, let's be all about unity. And he who's faithful in a small thing will be faithful in bigger things. And yeah, I think there'll be times when I'm going to start offending people. Actually, I have to confess this. When I did this show on the hiddenness of God, I had an interpretation that a lot of Christians may not agree with. But I said, I could be wrong, but am I going to speak my conscience or not? And I chose to speak my conscience. And, I had a lot of trepidation. I was going to lose a lot of subscribers because of what I said. And I said, I'm going to say it. So I don't know how I got on that, but the whole thing about being pulled away by money and conflicts in the church, I really commend pastors that say, I'm just going to tell it like it is.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be hard.
Yeah, particularly when your income is completely reliant on the church gifts. You don't want the church to split because you might lose half your income or whatever, and that's tough. That's tough to deal with that. But anytime that comes up from now on, anytime some pastor's worried about his church splitting and losing income, I'm going to point to James Coates. And anybody who doesn't know who that is, it's the pastor who went to jail for the gospel in Canada.
Wow.
I'm going to go, guys, you aren't willing to lose a little bit of income to tell the truth, resign. Because you're not a shepherd, you're a wolf.
And that's really tough, standing on integrity. I mean, there's always a chance it would be wrong, but you start doing things against your conscience, it starts to become a slippery slope. You start to bend here and there, and that money starts to look really attractive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's what's happening. I'm afraid that's what's happening in the seminaries.
I think that's true in a lot of seminaries. I think that's not necessarily across the board, but I think a lot of seminaries, it's much more about the money and keeping the seminary open and keeping the institution going than it is actually standing against the popular culture and standing for what is the truth actually is.
Yeah. So, I mean, before we close, let's give some tangible examples. Church discipline. Okay. And let me try to say this without maybe offending, compromising someone's privacy. There is a place to have. There's a case like Rosaria Butterfield. Okay, so this is a well-known one. She was a lesbian, and she was attending church services, but she wasn't. She didn't become a member. There was a place for her to, at least start hearing the gospel. So she came to church and she had her haircut and she had her, gay rights thing, bumper sticker when she parked in the parking lot. So I know of people that had, lifestyles that aren't approved in, the New Testament would call it out as sin, but because they kept coming to church and kept hearing the truth, they stopped. Now they can't be in ministry. They can't be church members, but they can come to the sanctuary and hear the gospel. I'm fine with that personally.
Oh, absolutely. The church should never kick someone out because they're living a sinful lifestyle if they're not a member of the church. If they're just someone coming in off the street, I can't think of a better place in the world for them to be than sitting in that church.
And so that's what happened to Rosaria Butterfield. She's now the wife of a minister. Just a beautiful testimony.
Yeah. Now, I will say, though, I'm going to qualify my previous statement. I can think of better places for them to be depending on the church. And I'm going to illustrate that for you. So this came out recently. I don't know if you get the newsletter from Answers in Genesis, but apparently one of their speakers, Dr. Terry Mortensen, was actually basically deplatformed by a church that he was speaking at because he offhand referenced that homosexuality and transgenderism were wrong alongside of pornography and incest and other sexual sins. And this church, the pastor, had two services for the church. Pastor pulled him aside after the first church service and said, hey, you can't do that. We have someone here who goes to this church who's homosexual. We have a homosexual couple that comes. I need you to cut that down. And Mortensen went, you have got to be kidding me. And the pastor asked him to put some design-based slides in. So he put the design-based slides in, but he still stuck to his guns, and he didn't take that part out. Like he didn't not say that homosexuality was sinful. Yeah. And the church removed all of his presentations from their website. I actually went and looked at the church website. They're not there.
Terrible.
And the pastor openly apologized for having Mortensen come and speak.
Yeah. See, good point there. Depends on.
And this is exactly why I say in some churches, you're not better off. Yeah.
I wanted to say that the Trainwreck Conversion by Rosaria Butterfield, I didn't read the whole book, but there are summaries of it in, essays that describe it. It's very, very powerful because she had one morning to decide, what she's going to do. And then when she's like going to church for like 2 years, and she started reading the Bible, and people noticed that as she read it, and she read it cover to cover in all sorts of versions. She's an English teacher, and it started to affect her. So I can imagine her reading through something like First Chronicles, which is just genealogies. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, there's also like these long lists in the Bible, like Ezra. Uh-huh. One of the times that I just had this powerful spiritual feeling was when I was reading the book of Ezra, of all things. Mm-hmm. I just felt like, it was a very powerful spiritual experience. And he was just giving the numbers of all the various tribes. Mm-hmm. It's very, because it sounded real. And Rosaria Butterfield she noticed that this didn't sound literary. What did it sound like? It sounded historical. And it started to change her. That's why some of these passages in the Bible that look so boring are actually pretty powerful. You think about, it's trying to convey history, in fact. Anyway, she started to change. So she's in the church for a while, and then she made that decision, and she had to leave her partner. And that was really painful because she had to hurt. It's painful for her and painful for her partner, and leaving her friends behind.
Yeah. And
so that was very, so I'm fine. I just want to clarify. I'm fine with people going to the sanctuary, and notwithstanding what you said, it depends on the church.
Right. Yeah. But if you're going to hear clear Bible
applies to members and elders, if an elder is professing a certain thing and he's beating his wife, he needs to be disciplined. Our church split about it. Can you believe that? He got caught beating his wife. Our church split because he got kicked out by the rest of the elders. So I mean, if you're like, okay, that was pretty painful. I mean, I'm just giving you a real story here because he's a very popular preacher. I mean, the parking lot was packed, overrunning because he's just very charismatic. And people got really angry that they kicked him out. I'm just like, you want to keep a wife beater as your pastor, mm-hmm. and he's not repentant? If he repented, that might have,
I would argue that he still probably doesn't fall under the biblical qualifications of ruling his home well.
Yeah. So, but a lot of the congregation left on that. I'm just like, I don't know what the problem is here. What about the missus? Do you not care for the children and the missus here? He needs to be disciplined also to tell him what you're doing is not good for your family. Yeah. I'm just like, okay, so this happens. This stuff happens.
Yeah. But at that point, the church needs to split because there are people there who are not there for the Bible and not there for truth. They're there for personality. And if they're there for a personality, they don't need to be there.
Our church was not charismatic, by the way.
No, but he's actually hit on something that's informative. There's a difference between a charismatic church and a charismatic personality.
Yeah, very charismatic personality.
And I find that a lot of times in evangelicalism, we tend to promote people who have charismatic personalities rather than solid home lives and strong doctrinal beliefs. Because people who are charismatic get along with everyone. Someone like me and Sal, we're willing to fight people if we need to, and Sal's a little bit less than I am, But
Sal much less than you.
Okay. Hey, I'm not John. Okay, I'm not an attack dog. I'm somewhere in the middle. Hey, everybody's got a role. John's role is attack dog. My role is, kind of guard the parapets, and Sal can do whatever else. Sal can just present the information and be nice to everybody. He can be the ambassador.
Yeah, speaking charismatic person, I thought Ravi Zacharias was very charismatic.
Yes. The one thing I noticed about him in the very little bit I listened to him, he was a very good storyteller.
Storyteller.
Get you in. He could emotionally connect with his audiences really well, and it helped. He had a British accent in the U.S. Just being real, that's a thing.
Oh, yeah. And there were some things. His commentary on postmodernism was very, very sharp. Some of the best I've ever heard. Mm-hmm. Very creative about it too. See, now everyone's hearing some of what's going on in their congregations. Yeah. So I've
been through several church splits in my time, and they're never pleasant. And if the split is over the color of the carpet, it's a stupid reason to split. But if it's over a point of essential doctrine, it is a good reason to split. Because doctrine is by its very nature divisive, because it divides truth from error. And error cannot be tolerated in the Church of God. Mm. We're supposed to be a bride of Christ that is without spot or blemish or any such thing. If we're going to do that, we need to hold to pure doctrinal truth, and we need to actively stand for it, not just go along to get along.
Yeah. It's a high calling, and even the early Christian church, I think in the 7 churches of Asia Minor, there are only 2 churches that the Lord really commended, Smyrna and Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. The other 5 had their issues.
Yes.
So all this to say is I love the church, but the Bible teaches it's not going to be common that churches get it all right. It's going to be rare, and
Well, if let's just put it this way: there's no such thing as a perfect church, and if you find one, don't join it; you'll ruin it. Yeah. But there are good churches out there, certainly, just like there are good seminaries out there. They're few and far between, but there are good churches and there are good seminaries. Yeah. All right.
And I hope. Oh my goodness. I'm just going to highlight this. We had a split in the 90s. None of them survived. 2 are now mosques. The rest is gone.
That's a pretty common fate for churches these days, becoming mosques. That's pretty common in the UK. This internet culture that we've had, we're kind of a motley crew, but it's been comforting because, like Sandy Pigeon, he recently left my church, McLean Bible, and I'm kind of stuck partly because of my mother's situation, and I'm wrestling through some things because we may have a vote that may overturn the elder board. We don't know what's going on. I mean, I wanted to say, it's one of those decisions. It's like, do you stay on because you have that vote to overturn and maybe fire a pastor? And some people just got so fed up they left. And I said, let's not be too hasty because you have the power of the vote. We can kick out. You can exercise and clean the church, but some of them just got too fed up. And so I just wanted to let you know what's going on there. Mm-hmm. But Sandy, and I think he said this publicly, he said he decided that he needed to worship where his wife is. So, because they're worshiping in 2 separate churches on Sunday morning. So he said, I'm going to be with my wife. So good on him. Yeah, no, I agree.
So there are situations like, and I thought about this in the New Testament. What do you do, like, if you're part of the Corinthian church? Do you quit and go to another city like Philadelphia? I mean, I don't know. Okay, so I'm praying the Lord will guide me what to do. So I'm not saying the decisions are always 100% clear. And in this case, I've been kind of quietly hoping that the congregation would at least hang around for a vote before they up and quit. And so we don't, that's just, here's the situation. I was just talking about the internet culture. Here's the situation where you have two brothers who are like me and Sandy. And definitely for him, it seems he made, I approve of this decision to leave. And I'm still undecided whether I should stay or not. So,
I mean, and Sal, you're not the only one. Like my parents are wrestling with the same thing. They're in a denomination, or they're in a church that's in a denomination right now. They found out that the denomination is going really hard left. They're trying to get the church out. A lot of the older folks in the church don't want to leave, so they're fighting their way through that right now. And of course, they also don't have a pastor right now, so they're trying to solve that problem too. And and as my dad says, I don't want to get somebody from one of these really bad seminaries. So we want to get the church out before then. But a lot of people in the church don't really want to leave because they've been that denomination for X number of years. And that's what I've been, Brady, that's what I've been telling my dad. If you lose the vote, get out, take as many people with you and start a church.
Yeah. If you can't find a good one, make one. So along those lines, even though this is the internet, definitely is not church. It's been a way for brothers to support each other.
Yes.
And the fact that Sandy comes here, we actually meet privately every now and then. We have a private apologetics group, and he sends me emails almost every day, and it's been very comforting. So here's a brother who's supporting me, uplifting me, even though he's left the congregation, and also with my blessing. It's like, yeah, go Sandy, be with your wife. That's the right thing to do.
Yeah, agree.
So good on him for that. So this has been a fun conversation. I'm sorry to take you away from your biology homework.
Honestly, I'm writing a paper on sexual selection right now, so like I'm bored out of my skull because like the way the paper has to be written, and I won't give away too many details, but basically the professor created a fictional situation and you have to write the paper about the fictional situation. I'm like, I don't have enough details. You got to give me more details. I don't know. So,
okay. Well, We're going to wrap up the stream. I mean, we've had so much fun, even though I'm dead tired and I have responsibilities I'm neglecting. But this has been my break in the middle of the day, just to alert all the viewers. This talk was very much spur of the moment, and I said I only have 15 minutes to talk about a debate, and so I said, I think I know what I'll do is I'll invite Emory here, and he could talk about cemeteries. Seminaries.
Yeah, and I've got a lot more. So one of these days we can do a full show, Sal, and I can actually have like slideshows and actually be.
Yeah.
But I wasn't prepared for that tonight, so I didn't have that ready. But I can throw a whole slideshow together on this and just talk about the direction of some of these schools and some of the stuff that's going on and how basically it's just two different forms of Gnosticism.
By the way, here you go. Andrew Kaufman, and God bless you, brother Andrew. Yes, I love this forum. You gentlemen lift me up and teach me so much. Thank you for sharing your big brains, brothers. Along those lines, I'm going to try to be building a website so the information's better organized. And I'm hoping that, just like where it was saying here, you can listen to the best teachers for free. And I'm going to put together some of what I consider some of the best sermons. Although unfortunately, sometimes the best sermons are not by the most theologically correct. Some of the rest of the stuff they say is bad.
Right.
But they had I'm debating this because Joel Osteen gave one talk on the parable of the talents. It was theologically perfect. You would not have known he has some other, but it was the best sermon I ever heard on.
Wait, he actually said something intelligent?
Oh my goodness. And and I was telling an elder, I confessed to him, one morning because people were giving me a hard time that I said I actually liked that sermon by Osteen. And he said, you know what? God can talk. If God can talk through a donkey, he can talk through Joel Osteen. But that being said, Andrew, I am trying to collect the website to be able to. So this would be a very good project. It's like, let's pick 10 good sermons that would encourage people, and or even 3 that you found that were just very powerful, and and we could have, that would be wonderful, or a great theologian talking about something. So we're going to be trying to collect these things, so you could have these things. You get a good seminary education for free. And one of the nice things now with these audiobooks or even lectures, you can just listen to it while you're doing something. So I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's telling me we can be of service to people wanting to be closer to God and who don't have time for cemeteries or the money.
Yeah.
And because we're not doing this to promote our channels, because we're going to be linking to other people's works. We're just happy to serve as aggregators, and and also the user feedback. If you find something objectionable, we'll take it down. We would be glad to get feedback if you find something. And so I just realized we could be of I'm sorry.
You're reading the same comment I am.
we can, given what we just talked about, because we were being pretty harsh about the climate here, but God has left a record of good teaching, and we can find it. And I look forward to that project. So if because I do feel kind of bad that maybe the last month I've been really negative, because I'm complaining about the theistic evolutionists. I'm complaining about the seminaries. I'm complaining about the sermons. I'm complaining about the culture. And it's like I haven't really given a lot of positive stuff. And now this is a chance for me on my website to try to convey positive things to help lift up the body. And so, Andrew Kaufman, thank you so much for your encouragement. And I think that motivates myself and Emory and everyone else to try to be of good service in a positive way, rather than just, calling out all the bad stuff. Right. That's actually an easy job, because there's so much of it out there.
Yeah. I could spend the entire rest of my life just going through a couple of YouTube channels that I won't name. But like just going through a couple of, I would be permanently employed. But that's not what I'm here for. Like I don't just want to, like I did a debunk of Sentinel apologetics last week. It was very popular. I won't do that again this week. It's not what I'm here for. I'm going to try and do something that's a little more nerdy, geeky, a little bit more sciencey, because I want people to not just come for conflict and negativity. Like there's a point where you have to fight, and there's a point where you have to say things that are harsh and strong. But there's also a point where you need to say, okay, let's be positive, let's build, let's try to actually do something and build something up, rather than just tear everybody else around us down.
So to that end, this channel, and I'm glad I'm kind of farming out the channels. One is just purely academic, because I do a lot of academic stuff. It's not really church oriented. To that end, on this channel, maybe about 15% of the content will now be Christian testimonies, just to encourage people, because there's some beautiful stories. And then we'll have archaeology and history, which also has encouragement, because we get to learn about the church fathers and other Christians of the past. Very inspiring. I mean, you think we have it rough. You look at the first and second century church. They serve as an example how to live the Christian life in a very hostile culture. And it's Sandy Pigeon who helped me see this. So, and then of course the bread and butter of the channel, which is creation science, will do that. So these are just some announcements. We'll do a little bit of presuppositional apologetics, because that's what brought me back to the Christian faith. It's actually very simple. I'll just elaborate on it more, maybe 5% of that. Right. When Randolph Richardson said there's no answers in atheism, I said, you know what? That encapsulated everything I wanted to say about presuppositional apologetics. There's no answers in atheism. Yep. And I was really astonished to hear him be so blunt about it. And I said, we could take that and run with it.
Does that spell the end of a certain nameless YouTube channel, Sal?
Yes. No. That one is is the opposite. It's claiming there are answers in atheism.
No, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
does I don't know what Randolph exactly terms himself, but does Randolph admitting that there are no answers in atheism kind of put an end to that?
And then we'll go into biblical difficulties because there's some passages in the Old Testament, and that'll be about 5%. But I'm going to, how did I pick those numbers? That's about the proportion of things we covered in our private apologetics group. And we never expected the group to have like already about 80 meetings with it. No, we've had like 120 meetings in the span of a year, 120 meetings. And it's like, what are you doing? Just talking about how to argue with atheists. I said, that's not ultimately what I define apologetics. You're learning about the testimony of God in the things that he's worked. John 10:38, Jesus said, if you don't believe my words, believe my works, believe the works. And I found that very interesting. And so our group has studied the works, studied the lives of Christians, studied intelligent design and creation science. And it put a very worshipful feeling that when we'd study archaeology, history, creation science, intelligent design, especially intelligent design, a few things about young Earth, but especially intelligent design, we would be coming away there just like feeling the presence of God. And that's what I want people to feel. Now, granted, creations, some people go to my nerd talks, it's like, you're not going to feel the Spirit of the Lord. I'm sorry. When I start going through thermodynamics and the Sacre-Tetrode equation, it's like, I'm not expecting you to feel the presence of the Lord there, all right?
Well, you might if your brain explodes and you meet him in a hurry.
So, but people, and you could almost sense it when James Tour was talking, and he was going through all these chemistry talks. People were just praising the Lord in the chat, and it's like, yeah, I get it, because I see it in my own group. They're able to make the connection, and so that's what I hope I could do in this channel, and because there are a lot of hurting souls out there. And, they keep saying this is stupid. I'm just like, okay, if you're an atheist, what answers do you have?
Yeah.
They really do. I didn't realize this, but they go through a lot of criticizing Christianity. The Christians in general are not astute enough to say, so what do you have to offer me instead? Yeah. And Randolph Richardson said, there's no answers in atheism. Atheism has no answers for anything. I think that's verbatim or very close to it. He said, atheism doesn't have answers for anything. I'm like, okay, so you get where I'm going with that,
Yeah. So you should get that. You should get a clip of that and clip it out of John's stream and just play it periodically, kind of like John does with Coke, Diet Coke, and regular Coke.
I'm going to do that.
Clip that out because that's a big admission coming from someone who's a non-theist. This isn't like me saying there's no answers in atheism. This is someone who actually is not a theist saying atheism has no answers.
And the surprising thing in my debate with Amy Newman and Raging Atheist, they actually agreed. That's the best of my recollection. They didn't dispute that. At the very least, they didn't dispute that. And I was also saying, I said, okay, you can't tell what's right and wrong because you lack belief in God. It doesn't follow that you can deduce what's right and wrong because you lack belief in God. And I said, one of the things is the atheists, even amongst themselves, can't decide what's right or wrong. There's no scientific answer. There's no scientific answer whether you should be an anti-theist or not if you're an atheist. And I may do a show where I say lack of belief in God leads to faith, absolute faith, and a lot of other things that you can't prove. And that's what's happening. Atheists are having to make decisions about meaning in life with no proof that their course is correct. And that this is kind of something I began to realize just in the last 2 months, especially in the wake of my Dillahunty debate. So, yeah, so it's going to be fun. And on a totally nerd note, because this is so uplifting, I'm sorry to give it kind of a downer. I'm inviting CRISPR-Cas and even maybe Dr. Dan to talk about phylogenetics, because even what I studied in what evolutionary biology I studied was in the context of bioinformatics. There's stuff that I don't know. Like I don't quite know the terms of synapomorphy or apomorphy.
Yeah, those are phylogenetic terms. Yep, I'm familiar with those.
Yeah. So I just wanted to say you're invited to come out to that. And what time is it where we're here? It's 1:50 a.m. in the morning Eastern time.
Thankfully, I'm off tomorrow, so I can actually afford to be up this late.
Oh wow! This is by the way, this is a blessing that you came on. It's real. You're a real encouragement, brother.
I'm glad I can be useful. But yeah,
I thought that and I'm sorry I had to cut your list short. But I really wanted to share that article about.
Well, no, I get that. I get that. The articles, it was a very good article, and it offered some solutions. Which, I mean, one of these days I'll actually throw this into a slideshow format as like a presentation and be a little more organized. I wasn't prepared for that tonight, so I apologize for that.
Yeah. So so that's about all I. Well, this isn't goodbye, everyone. I may be doing a show shortly on protein. Oh my goodness. I've gotten almost uniform support for my claim that proteins have independent origins from the evolutionists. And so I may be doing a show on that. But I don't think they quite realize how much they're giving away by making that admission, because it's also going to show the difficulty of macroevolving major protein families from pre-existing ones. So that's kind of next on the slate. And I may be reading some testimonies. So Emory, thank you for joining.
Oh, glad to. Fortunately, I was off today, so I could afford to. So,
well, how about you give us the last word, and we'll shut down the stream.
Sure. So just so that anybody doesn't think that I'm completely negative, like I think there's a place for seminaries, and I think there's a place for that theological education, but it needs to be done carefully. And I think we have given over control of a lot of our seminaries, even the ones viewed as conservative seminaries, to the enemy. And we need to fight to reclaim those or build new institutions to replace them. So that's my 2 cents. Feel free to come at me on my own terms. Don't come after Sal. Okay, come after me. I'm actually willing to fight I'm actually willing to throw punches. Sal's too nice. But so if you've got issues with what I've said tonight, come at me on my own channel in his image. Feel free to come after me. I'm more than happy to defend. And if you've got questions about anything I said, I am more than happy to link to proof of everything I said or more. So like, this is not me making stuff up. I wish it was, but it's not. So yeah, thanks for coming out, and thank you, Sal, for letting me hang out on your channel.
And thank you to all our viewers. Take care, and God bless you. Good night.